Notre Dame fans, Irish Breakdown Nation, welcome back to our Saturday show. Sean Davis from Lucky Lefty Podcast, also recruiting analyst at Irish Breakdown, man of many, many talents. We were also talking about cooking today. Someone's going to be having a barbecue, a cook-off here soon with their family. So, man of many, many talents. It's been a while since we've been able to do one of these shows, Sean, but I'm definitely glad to have you back, and we're ready to rock and roll. We got some really interesting stuff we're going to talk about today.
Man, I can't wait to get into it.
So we actually have some stuff. The stuff we talked about today on the phone was supposed to be a quick 5-minute conversation about what we're going to talk about today. Well, that's about an hour till my phone died. But we got stuff planned for next week too already. So it's going to lead into it. So today we're going to talk about sort of 3 different topics. And I think the format we're going to try to take with this Saturday show is going to be very similar to the midweek musings that I've done at Irish Breakdown in the past. I'm going to get back to here very soon. And then the first topic is going to be some recruiting topic. It can be a specific player. It can be a big picture thing. Today, we're going to talk a little big picture. Then we're going to talk about a specific Notre Dame team topic. And today's topic is going to be who's Notre Dame's most irreplaceable player. And then the third topic is going to be more of a bigger picture Notre Dame college football or a college football Notre Dame opponent type of angle. There may be a Notre Dame sort of side to it, which we'll have next week on our college football topic, but it's something more of a college football at large type of discussion. And today's is the Bama dynasty over, or is it in its final days? And so we're going to talk about that as well. So Sean, let's get started with recruiting. And the reason that the recruiting topic kind of came up is originally we're going to talk about just specifically about Cedric Irvin Jr.'s decommitment. And I think both of us have mixed feelings on it, Sean, and I'm speaking for both of us because we talked about it. And part of the mixed feelings are so talking to sources, and I haven't heard anything from the Notre Dame side on this yet. Talking to some folks on the Cedric Irvin Jr. side of it, it sounds like Notre Dame told him they didn't have room for him anymore, which I have mixed feelings on. Number one is, look, the kid committed to the previous staff. Basically, not Dylan McCullough. He committed more to Lance Taylor and Brian Kelly. The relationship that Lance had with his dad, I believe they coached together at Alabama back in the day when they were first getting into the coaching profession. And since then, he has done everything right. He has not visited other schools. Cedric has not visited other schools. He's been very pro Notre Dame, selling Notre Dame to other recruits. It's kind of like I feel like, Sean, he is a byproduct of the previous way of doing things. And this is what it came down to. He is a byproduct of the way it used to be at Notre Dame, which is nice player, but why are you taking him that early? It's because you could.
Right.
And it's a similar situation to what we saw with Jack Nickel last year. And what we're finding out is that this staff is one that is, number one, willing to make the hard decisions. And part of it is telling a kid who's a great kid, who's done everything right, who has been loyal to you and done all those things that, hey, man, we can't reciprocate it. And that kind of concerns me and makes me feel for the kid. But at the same time, Sean, this is the life of playing big boy football on a recruiting trail.
You said something that's the key to this, right? Because we both feel and understand both sides of this coin. The fact that this staff was not the staff that originally recruited him made it a lot easier for them to come to this decision and probably have this conversation, which I would probably lean more to the side of the staff to say, okay, if you're going to establish the ground rules or the way you're going to do things, this is the conversation you have to have with this young man. And you have to be honest with him. And then you set the standard, you take the hit, but going forward, it's obvious the direction. The entire staff knows how we're going to operate. Right. And we're not going to take, I don't like saying these type of kids because that makes it seem like he wasn't.
Make sure you're really sold on a kid before you take him.
That's exactly. And as you said before, Notre Dame fit per se, absolutely. Did he do everything correctly?
Mm-hmm.
No. I go back to a conversation I shared that I had with somebody else that's in the recruiting world, and they alerted me to 80 to 90 kids. And I had never heard anyone say this. He said there are only 80 to 90 kids that are good enough in this country to play for Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
He said that's the mentality you have to have if you're going to win in Notre Dame. You can't widen that out to 150 to 200.
Right.
Because those are the same parameters for an Iowa State.
Right.
Or Kansas State. Like if you're trying to win a championship, there are only a certain amount of kids that are good enough to play on your team.
Right.
And I think that's the parameters that this coaching staff is really trying to put in place now. Establishing this is the level of play we want our players to be at when we recruit them. And unfortunately, you're going to see some guys that we can look back in the past and say to ourselves, you know what? That kid was a 3-star when he committed to Notre Dame, and he gave Notre Dame 4 really good years.
Yes.
And I love the way he turned out. I love the way he developed.
Even if he wasn't a great player.
Absolutely.
Like,
and
we're not talking about the 3-stars like Kyron Williams who end up playing becoming All-Americans. We're talking about the kids that, like Trevor Rulin, right? I mean, Trevor Rulin was a spot starter at times, but like that kid was a really good piece to your equation for 5 years. 5 years even. And there's a need for kids like that. But you've got to be careful that those kids aren't being brought in at positions where you have a smaller number of players, running back, quarterback, safety, right? Because you're going to have smaller numbers at those positions than other positions, Sean. And there was a question from John A1 that I want to address that's part of this conversation too. He says Tommy Rees was OC when he committed. Was he not involved at all in Irvin's recruitment? No. The decision to take Cedric Irvin was made by the running backs coach and the head coach. That's basically how that went down. And there's the other side of the coin is, Sean, is people say, there was a question that John DeCristio said, or a comment that he made, and I think it speaks to, how some people feel. It's loyalty not returned is just not right. Don't like it. Our word should be our word. And I think there's a lot of value to that comment from John. However, what my question is, what is better for the young man? That you tell him now before he's taken any officials. He's got plenty of time to get his recruitment done. Do you do it now? Do you just keep loading up at running back and then force him out, which is what they did with Jack Nickel last year? It's supposed to, hey, Jack, we don't have a spot for you. They say, hey, we're going to still take you, but we're going to keep recruiting more running backs. Notre Dame was honest with Cedric, from what I'm told. Whether you agree with it or not, that's a different, people can have legitimately different views on that I respect. But what is better, to tell him that, hey, we don't have a spot for you, or to bring a kid into your team knowing you don't think he can play for you, knowing that you're going to out-recruit him in this class and next year's class, and then what? He leaves in a year or two?
Yeah.
Like, what is the better thing for them, right? And look, if he showed up and he outplayed other guys, they're going to play him. They're not going to be like, well, we're not, But he's not that guy right now in their view. Some people may disagree with that, but it's not a simple answer as your word is your word. It's not that simple, because you sticking to your word, it's like, okay, but I don't feel that way anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's like staying in a relationship that you're not happy in just because, you feel obligated is not healthy for either one of you. Right.
Right.
And then you only increase the heartbreak down the road when ultimately it doesn't work out, and so this is a relationship like that is, do you tell the kid the truth now, or do you stick to your word, which is important? I probably shouldn't do air quotes because it is important. Your word needs to mean something.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, when circumstances change and you don't view that kid as someone who can play for you, do you bring him in anyway to keep your word? Or do you sit down and say, hey, look, here's the reality of it. You're just not a guy that we see in our plans. So I don't think it's as easy of a decision as maybe some people think, Sean. I do think it's a more complicated issue than people
Is this an easier conversation? Because of course we're getting it from one side right now.
Mm-hmm.
We've yet to hear the other side, because the conversation could have, I'll just go ahead and just play it out how the conversation could have gone. The conversation could have been, we signed Jabrian Price. We already have a full running back room. We have Jaden Lamar that we're still recruiting. We got Richard Young and we have Jeremiah Love.
Right.
These are three guys we really like, and we're recruiting all of them. Now,
Right.
the way things are now, you can transfer in a year if you come in and play. But why would you waste that year when you can go and have early impact at a program? If we release you right now, give you that opportunity to go find that team. Like, we love you, we offered you, but we're not going to stop recruiting these guys.
Right.
We want you to know that.
Right.
Now, if it's an open dialogue and his side says, well, we don't like that, we don't think it's fair, well, I understand that, but this is how we're going to move forward with this. If you don't like that, it's up to you. We'll let you publicly say what you want to say to talk about the situation. We don't have to say anything, and you can move on.
Right.
Now, if they take that as they basically told us we don't have room for you. Well, that's not what was said, but it's kind of what was implied.
Right.
In a sense.
Right. Now, I don't know if that was directly said. That's what I was told from his side of things.
No, that's what I'm saying. Right. That's what you've been told from that side.
Right.
So with that,
and I'm working with that. Yeah, and I'm working with that being the assumption, whether it was directly or not, because I think I think that whether it was implied or beat around the bush, I would much rather him actually done that. What I hate is when you just we're going to force a kid out without telling him that. We're just going to keep recruiting them.
That's even worse.
We've seen staffs do this where they just don't call a kid.
That's worse.
It's like that's petty and childish, right? Like, they told him before the official visits. Look, I'd have been ticked if they'd have had the kid waste an official visit and brought him up. That would have been right. So there's not an easy way to do this. There's not a clean way to do this. The only way to do it is honesty. And now I'm still trying to get clarification for this, but I was told that it was a face-to-face conversation. I don't know that for a fact, but I was told it was, which, I don't think it makes it any better for Cedric, but it says something about Notre Dame if that is in fact true. Again, that's just we're just working on one side of this conversation for right now. But at the end of the day, the whether you like it or not, and I'm not trying to change anybody's mind.
No,
I don't like it either way, but I understand it. And when I say I don't like it, it's not that I don't criticize Notre Dame. I actually am fine with what Notre Dame did. As long as they did it, what we're hearing they did, which was, it was a face-to-face conversation. It was an honest conversation. It wasn't a beating around the bush. It wasn't a stringing the kid on. It was, here's the deal. I don't love it. I feel for Cedric because, again, this is a kid. This isn't a kid that was taking visits to other schools. He wasn't like not communicating with the staff. He was coming up on visits. He was selling the program. He was doing everything that you ask a commit to do. It's just, the reality is, as you look at and say, are we going to win a title with this kid or not? And maybe they may regret it, but this is how they feel, and they were honest about it. And I can respect that, even though I can also hurt for the kid, because I think Cedric is very much a Notre Dame type of kid.
I agree.
But you're also dealing with 85 scholarships, and you're trying to win championships, which is why kids like that you don't take early. You don't put, that's why you should always, you can get a kid like that later if you miss out on other players. Same thing with Jack Nickel. You could have got, if Notre Dame never would have taken Jack Nickel early and missed out on tight ends, they could have flipped him for Michigan State at the end of the process if he would have gone there first.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say, it's like, I don't see the need to, take kids like that early. So how the conversation got into what we're going to discuss the rest of the show, Sean, is that conversation where I think you and I are both on the same page. We hate it for the kid. Got a ton of respect for Cedric Irvin Jr. I said this yesterday, Sean, I'm going to be rooting for that kid wherever he goes.
Yeah.
He's an easy kid to root for.
Yeah.
And he's a good football player. He's just not you're trying to beat Bama and Clemson and Ohio State type football player.
Yeah, can I say that? Because I know there are a lot of people on the message board that agree with us, don't like the way it's going down. But honestly, over the last year, this is what most of us have been asking for.
Yes.
It will be real.
I didn't ask you this, Sean, but it just popped in my head when you said that. I personally would have a different opinion of this, and I would be hammering Notre Dame if the same staff that took his commitment was the staff that took it away.
Yeah.
Like, let's say Brian Kelly didn't leave and Lance Taylor was still, or even if Brian Kelly was still here and it was just a different running backs coach, everything else is the same.
Yeah.
But if Lance Taylor was still here and Brian Kelly was still here, I'd be a lot more ticked about it. Not because I'm upset with Brian Kelly or Lance Taylor. It's a chance. It's just you're the one that made this decision.
Right.
Like if it was Marcus and Deland and Tommy, you made the decision. Just because you got buyer's remorse now, you don't punish the kid for it, right? Like I'd be much more critical of it if they did it. And so like if they decided, like, I don't even want to use a kid that's actually committed because then people start, Notre Dame may drop so and so. But if they offered a kid in February, got his commitment, then changed their mind down the road, I'd hammer them for it. The reason I'm more willing to embrace this as an understandable thing is because it was a different staff and different coaches that recruited him initially and took his commitment. I guess my only thing that I'd say is you probably should have figured this out sooner. You should have given Cedric a heads up on this sooner. Like, did you really need five months to figure out that Cedric wasn't a guy you really wanted? And say, well, yeah, because you needed to find out if other kids were interested in your program. So that's fair. I get it. I get that, right? It took some time to see with Jeremiah Love and Jay Lamar, and then now you're getting Richard Young on campus, right? And you've got a shot there. So, I'm more sympathetic, Sean, because of the fact that it was because there was a coaching change, a significant one on that side of the ball. I'm more willing to say, okay,
and this
I understand it.
Totally different than the one we saw with Justin Rhett, where it was, lock in. Like if you're locked in, lock in. Irvin Jr. was locked in. Without a doubt, Notre Dame kid, wanted to come to Notre Dame. And we talked about this last night. You get a new running back coach in, and you can't blame him for beating the bushes to see what pops up with the top talent at that position. And Richard Young pops up. And go watch his film.
Jeremiah Love pops up. Jeremiah Love wasn't on the board when Dylan McCullough got hired. He wasn't.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And this is what, as I said before, for a long time, we've seen Notre Dame have great running games without going after the top running backs in the nation. They've done it. Harry Heastand has made it happen, and they've developed running backs that eventually matriculated to the NFL, drafted in the third, fourth, or fifth round.
Some didn't get drafted. Josh Adams
didn't get drafted, but they were productive. Right. Now you're going to put next level talent behind that offensive line. You can only expect an even greater running game than we've seen under Harry Heastand at Notre Dame. And that's the vision. That lines right up with what Marcus Freeman did immediately as defensive coordinator when he came in. And he started recruiting a different athlete on defense than previously was.
And that leads kind of into the segue of where this conversation is going to go, Sean, is this situation with Cedric, as much of it is a bummer for him.
Yeah.
And I don't feel, I understand it. I don't feel great about it. It's hard to feel great about a kid had a dream. He wanted to play at Notre Dame, and he's always said it's a no-brainer to play at Notre Dame, and now that's gone. That makes my heart hurt a little bit. You know what I mean?
I agree.
But take that part away from it, and especially for you, because you're a parent. I mean, I'm not even a parent. I couldn't imagine what it's like as a parent going through that kind of thing,
Yeah.
But take that away. This is to me symbolic of the fact that Notre Dame is recruiting in a whole different mindset. And we kind of talked about how do we discuss this, and it was really come about what's different, Sean, is Notre Dame's recruiting culture is now different. It is not just you're working. I mean, it's an entire cultural change in recruiting, meaning this is a staff that has a completely different outlook on the importance of recruiting than the previous staff did. This is a staff that not only understands how important recruiting is, and it's not that it's just something you have to do, but something you need to do and want to do, whether you enjoy it or not, because putting great value on recruiting doesn't mean you love recruiting. I just know that if I want to win a championship, this is something I got to do, and I got to do it well.
Right.
There's also a thought of, the whole expression that was used previously, the shopping down a different aisle thing. And that's been completely like dismissed. And like, we're not doing that anymore. The aisle we're shopping down is the aisle that's going to lead to a national championship. And so that means that some of the kids that we were getting before, we're going to keep getting, right? And it's not just the elite players. I don't care who your coach is. Of course, you're going to recruit Michael Mayer. Of course, you're going to recruit Kyle Hamilton. But there's still that level of, okay, find those kids that maybe aren't the big time recruits that you think can become big time players, right?
Yeah.
I hope this staff would still recruit a guy like Avery Davis. And they are. Those versatile guys can play different things, but it's about upping your overall talent level, especially at some of the impact positions. And the way to do that is you've got to be willing to make the tough decisions sometimes, like we just talked about. There's another tough decision that the staff is talking about that we won't talk a ton about, but the Dante Moore situation. You're in a situation where you've got a kid who you have said all of our chips are in the table for this kid. All of our eggs are in the basket. Pick whatever phrase you want to use. They're all in on Dante Moore.
Right.
He's taking official visits. He's in Michigan this weekend. There's all these different things that could lead you to say, you know what? And we see it in this chat all the time. They need to find somebody. They need to find a backup plan. And this staff is saying, no, we're going to stay the course.
Yeah.
That is not an easy decision because there's going to be some panic of like, this kid is not set up a visit, to us. He hasn't publicly announced when he's coming to see us. He's not, he's saying weekends, but he's not locking in for sure. He's definitely locking in visits to here, and here. But what about us? There's a lot of things that if you aren't confident in your relationship with that kid can cause you to overreact and say, okay, you know what? We're going to go take so-and-so.
Right.
But this staff is staying on course. They're not falling for it. And I think you follow their actions. That's not an easy decision. And I don't know. And this is not an attempt to take a shot at the previous staff. It's just the reality. They would not have gone this deep into the Dante Moore recruitment without a quarterback. They would have moved on in April and gone and found someone else because you can't afford to miss.
Right.
This is another example. And I think it leads to the next point, Sean, which is the culture of this program now from a recruiting standpoint is it's real simple, Sean. We're Notre Dame.
Well said. Simply, we're Notre Dame. That's well said.
Yeah.
And
Alabama offered this kid. We're Notre Dame.
Notre Dame.
Yeah, but Ohio State's the leader for this kid. We're Notre Dame. Yeah. You really think you're going to get that many players out of the state of Texas with Sark there? Yeah, we're Notre Dame. That's the mindset that this staff has. And it means we'll go anywhere, any place, for any player against any team. And I love it.
And that's been represented recently. We saw the coaching staff. They've been all over the country. Most people thought, especially in the recruiting world, that as soon as Lincoln Riley took the job at USC, that the pipeline that was normally from Mater Dei would pick back up and you wouldn't see kids leave Mater Dei and go to Alabama like we saw Bryce Young. And guess what Notre Dame did in the month of May? They walked into Mater Dei and they offered 3 kids.
Right.
Like, we don't care.
Right.
Yes, we're coming after them too. We're putting everybody on notice. They've already planted a flag in Texas. Tommy Rees has replanted the flag in the Chicago area.
Mm-hmm.
They've hit Ohio. They've hit the DMV area. They're planting flags all over.
Al Gold, the IMG scrimmage the other night.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, here we are. We're Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
That's it. We're Notre Dame. And it's not in an arrogant way. Like, when I first kind of got into coaching, Sean, I remember I was recruiting, and he's a D1 coach now, but there was a high school coach. It was Ryan Williams, high school coach. Remember Ryan Williams, a running back that went to Virginia Tech?
Yeah.
He and I were having a conversation, really good dude. And he, he found out I was a Notre Dame fan, and he was like, yeah, we don't really care much for the Notre Dame coaching staff. And I'm like, oh yeah, why is that? Because this is like 2004. This is like the end of the Ty era.
Yeah.
And he's like, they're always the last school in for kids, because it's like it was a reputation like all the Northern Virginia coaches felt this way. They're always the last school in on a kid. They walk into the school with their little interlocking ND, like, you know, and treat you not like we're Notre Dame, like we're not afraid of you, we're Notre Dame, but more of like we're Notre Dame, bow to us.
Right.
You know, and it's like, dude, none of these kids know who you are. None of these kids know these kids weren't alive when, you know, and that's what the people say. These kids weren't alive when Lou Holtz was winning and stuff like that. You know, like they don't remember all that. They remember what you are now, which is not very good, you know, and
Right.
and it was about lack of work, just thinking you're going to walk in the door and we're Notre Dame and kids are just going to flock to us. No, this staff is saying, we're Notre Dame. We're not afraid of you. Now, they also understand too, Sean, and this is key. That means you got to work. You got to outwork these schools. And what you're seeing on the recruiting trail is you're now seeing Alabama following Notre Dame.
Yes.
Maybe they're not doing this directly, but you're now see Alabama, like Notre Dame gets on Ronan Hannafin early. They get a commit from Adon Schuler earlier. There's all these kids and Notre Dame gets on early. And then all of a sudden, next thing you see, Monroe Freeling. Now all of a sudden, then Alabama's following suit. It used to be the other way around, where Notre Dame either wouldn't get on a kid that Alabama wanted, or when Alabama would get on a kid, they'd kind of like, well, there goes that, you know, where this staff is like, I mean, think about it. Georgia and Alabama both offered Adon Schuler and like, whatever. You know, I mean, that's fine. He's not going there. Like, think about that.
Yeah.
And you know, where but it requires hard work. And that's the thing is, I haven't heard a single thing about a single coach on the staff that's not working. And that's not been true ever. Since I've become a Notre Dame. There's always at least 3 or 4 guys that just don't work.
Yeah.
At least. And this staff, it's not the case.
No.
Now, some guys aren't as effective right now. Their success isn't what others are, but they're working.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to a culture change, Sean. It's a culture change that involves, you know, we are capable of beating anybody for any kid, anywhere, any place and time. But we also know we got to work at it. We got to put in the work. We have to have a different message and all this stuff. We have to have all of this stuff all lined up and ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing. And I think now, again, and they're not perfect. There's been some missteps. There's been some communication issues at time. They're not even a completely well-oiled machine yet. They're not there yet, which makes me even more fired up about what this thing can be when they really get a year or 2 years, you know, doing it the way that Marcus Freeman wants to do it. That's when you start to get really fired up about what this group can be.
We're waiting to see what the on-field product is going to look like. You just touched on something. The competitive spirit of this staff of one another lends me to believe that once we actually see this team take the field, that's going to transfer to this team. You talked about everybody putting in that work. We saw Harry Heastan have a good 2 or 3 weeks. Then we saw Al Washington come on, have a good 2 or 3 weeks. We anticipate that Chancey Stuckey is going to have some good signs.
Already has a top 100 kid.
Already has a top, absolutely. And now, who's the one person that's been in the wings working really hard, and all of a sudden he gets a visit from possibly the best running back in the nation? It's Dylan McCullough.
Right.
He's been behind the scenes, you know, beating the bushes, seeing what he can make happen, putting in that work. They push each other. And they push each other because they can't look at the main guy up top and say, oh, well, he's resting.
Right.
You know, when you have a top guy out there outworking everybody, putting in calls more than everybody on the staff, and all of the commits, it's amazing. I shared this. I think Malik and I talked about this. And it's amazing that we talk to kids that are committed elsewhere that didn't choose Notre Dame. And they still say, yo, Marcus Freeman still calls me to this day. Like, no one called me more than Marcus Freeman. Like, so when you hear it being reported that he's the lead recruiter, we're not just saying that. He's putting in that work. He's showing the action. And he expects his staff to follow his leadership. And right now, that's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. And like you said, the culture has changed. It's shifted. Notre Dame fans have been asking for this.
Right.
They've been asking for this. So we really can't complain about when the shift took place and some of the fallout from the shift, because there was going to be fallout.
Mhm.
when and wherever it took place and however it took place. Unfortunately, a young man gets caught in the crossfire.
Right.
No one likes it, right? Could him, could his family, could the young man and his family badmouth Notre Dame on a recruiting trail after this? They could. But like you said, from what you've heard, the fact that they had enough integrity to go to him face to face. His father has been in the coaching business.
Sure.
His father understands how tough
I would hope.
he.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean he has to like it or be
No,
happy about it.
because his
Right.
son is hurt.
Right.
I wouldn't like it.
Right.
You hurt my son, I'm going
Right.
to take issue with it.
And my son did everything right. My son did everything
Absolutely.
you asked him to do.
Absolutely.
He didn't take other visits.
Absolutely.
You know, you're taking these kids, like these other kids that are committed, you're letting them go on these. My kid did everything right. He's been recruiting for you. He did everything right. I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
I would. But I think
Yeah.
at the same time, you also understand. And his dad playing at that level also, I think, gives him a level of like, look, you know what this is like, right? Like,
Yeah.
but but the reason you're not seeing this on defense, though, is because, again, the defense has been established last year. There wasn't the turnover on defense that we saw on offense. And again, it's disappointing for the kid, but I understand it. I don't like it, but I'm good with it. So I have all these conflicted views on it. But at the end of the day, this is what needs to be done to play big boy football. And that's the reality of it. It's just there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. I think they did the wrong thing the right way. And when I say wrong thing, my general impression of feeling is that if you take a kid's commitment, you honor it. I'm a believer in that.
Yeah.
There are circumstances, however, where it's understandable. A kid's circumstances change. He didn't do the work in the classroom. He had a major injury. Even then, I'm still like, okay, bring him in and put him on scholarship, right? I mean, and put him on a medical or something. But there's all types of situations where, I understand it. I don't like it, but I understand it. This is one of those ones where I'm more understanding of it because of the coaching change aspect of it. But I still don't like, oh yeah, I'm not cheering it. I'm not celebrating it because there's another person on the other end of this that didn't do anything wrong. He just, perceived to be not quite to the level that they want.
And we see
But it still needs to be done, though, Sean. That's the thing. It still needed to be done for both sides. It was right for them to do it, and it's good for Cedric. It may sting now.
Yeah.
When he's going to a different school and rushing for 1,000 yards instead of being the third or fourth string running back in Notre Dame, it's going to end up being the best thing for him. And maybe this gives him a little bit of an extra chip on his shoulder that he goes out and plays well. I hope that happens. I hope he finds a school where he can go, and he is the guy for them. You and I were talking about this with another recruit yesterday, and I won't say who it is, but is it better for this kid to be the fourth or fifth guy at Notre Dame or the number one guy somewhere else?
Yeah.
And in his instance and Cedric's instance, I think in both situations, it's better for them to go somewhere else and be the guy. And, as a person, I'd love for Cedric Irvin to be part of this class. And he's a solid player. I mean, I gave him a 4-star grade, but he also had a 4-star upside because he's just a solid player. Top 300 kind of player. They want impact guys, and I just don't think he is that.
You have had the opportunity to speak to Marcus Freeman more than I have. And in doing so, whomever it was in front of the Irvin family, and however they decided to present it, if Cedric Irvin Jr. looked them in the face and said, I don't care, coach, I still want to come, do you think they,
What, meaning like walk on?
Like I said, once again, we don't know how it was truly presented.
My understanding is that it was made very clear that the spot isn't there anymore. And I can follow up. I'm going to follow up with another source now that I'm trying to get some clarity on it. But that's my understanding of it. It was that, so. But even if it was that, to me, I would rather it be that than some sort of beating around the bush. Yeah. Try to walk the kid into the decision. Because I think they've tried that. I mean, I think it's been kind of obvious that they're looking for 2 to 3 more backs. I mean, they've said they've made it clear to people that they're going to take a third back in this class, like a Jeremiah Love if they can get him.
Yeah.
And Cedric wasn't taking the hit because he loves Notre Dame.
Right.
And that's the thing that sucks. Right. But again, at the end of the day, Sean, this is big boy football. I mean, that's what
this is the way it's done.
Right.
And we've wanted the Notre Dame recruiting to step up.
Right.
And go to the next level. And we expected Marcus Freeman to do that.
Right.
And no one really knows behind the scenes how you do that at this level.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes you have to make these type of decisions to be able to get to that level.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because we feel like Notre Dame represents the best of what college football is all about. And you don't want this type of story out there. If you're a Notre Dame fan, heck, I don't think the Notre Dame staff would like to have this story out there right now. They would have loved for him to get the idea based upon what was being said and say, you know what, I think I'm going to open my recruitment back up on his own. But he didn't. And ultimately, they had to go ahead and make the tough decision, to have the conversation with the young man and do things that need to be done to elevate the recruiting at that position.
Right. But if you want to recruit like the big boys, you've got to make the tough decision sometimes. And that's what this was, I believe.
Isn't it amazing in high school? At least for me, in my experience, the prettiest girls would always end up with the weirdest guys. Because all the guys that really liked her were too scared to say something. And the most awkward guy would actually walk up, introduce himself, have a conversation, and end up with her. And, you don't want to be that awkward program that's scared to go talk to the top guys. And Notre Dame, in some way, has been caught in that matrix, per se, of just being in the haze of, well, the top guys are talking to her. Top guys are trying to get him. Like you said, Alabama offered him. So, we might as well not even try. No.
Or we better get a backup plan just in case.
Absolutely. No.
Yeah.
Get in the fray. Fight. Going back to what you said. We're Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Like that is the best icebreaker in all of college football. There is no better icebreaker.
Yeah.
My name is such and so. I'm the position coach at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And we like you and we want to make an offer. There's no better way to introduce yourself to a kid.
You got to come with that though, Sean. That's the thing is you got to come. Like you almost have to have a little bit of a brashness, Yeah. And you can't just kind of walk in like, hey, we're trying to do some things. I mean, it's one of my favorite, GIF, whatever, however you say it, that I used to use all the time. It's the one of Vince McMahon just like pimp walking down the steps, right? And like Conor, what's the MMA guys? Conor McGregor, right? And then he's got that stupid thing, but it's like, you're just walking in the room like, hey, we're here. And you've talked about this before, Sean, where the Notre Dame coaches are kind of like breaking up the party. There's this party that Ohio State and Georgia and Alabama and Clemson have been having by themselves, and like SEC Short should make a video about this if they were willing to do like a pro Notre Dame thing, which they wouldn't. But it's like you could see them like having this, the four people in the room, and it's an Ohio State and it's Bama and it's Georgia and it's Clemson, and they're just kind of it's going to be one of them every year, and then occasionally in LSU they'll let them in, and then but Notre Dame's kind of like, no, we're busting this party, we're breaking this party up, we're going to be party crashers, and we know you don't want us here, right? Because you hate everything we represent, but we're coming whether you like it or not. And that's the mentality you got to have, and that's the mentality that Marcus Freeman has brought to this staff. And it's not in an obnoxious way. It's a real matter of fact, like, hey, y'all, look, we know you don't like it. We don't care. We're here, and we're Notre Dame, and the days of us shopping down a different aisle are over. We're coming right down your aisle, and we plan on, taking some of your stuff. We're going to take some of your groceries, and we're going to be the ones that land these kids. And so And that's what you got to be. And that's what I love about this staff. So,
and you know what? Salute to, I said this, and he's done a lot of things, and a lot of people might not particularly like him as a person, and that's fine. But the further I get away from the ultimate decision that was made that led to Marcus Freeman becoming the head coach, the guts it took to make that decision, I tip my cap to Jack Swarbrick. I really do. And I tip my cap to him jumping out in front of name, image, and likeness and letting it be known we're going to wait to see how things play out. We're not about to participate like everybody else.
Right.
I think he's done a great job. He's a very, very good leader. He has no problem putting his neck on the line and saying, yo, come for me. If it doesn't work out, come for me. The same thing with Marcus Freeman. I'm taking a risk. I know I'm taking a risk, but I feel like he's the right guy. And right now, the early returns on his decision to hire Marcus Freeman, they seem to be going very well. Ultimately, that will be determined by, win-loss record on the field. But, I have to tip my cap to Jack Swarbrick right now because things are trending in the right direction. Even if he's coming to the end of his tenure as athletic director, what he's done for this program in a lot of different areas up to this point during his tenure, I think he's done a really good job.
Sean, let's get to our next topic, which is Notre Dame related. So we were talking before the show about, who are the players that Notre Dame can least afford to lose? And the reality is that there's not just one, but we are going to pick one. And so we're going to kind of go through and talk about some of the players that we have on this discussion, why some of these guys are in the conversation. And then also we'll name our one. Because I don't think it's like some people are like, I'm reading the chat and they're like, well, it's a no-brainer. It's so-and-so. Well, I don't think it's quite that easy. It's definitely this guy. Well, and so we both talked like we both have one guy. It's the same guy, but it wasn't easy to get there. And so here's what we mean by like irreplaceable. It's not the best player.
No.
It's not the guy that, is at the biggest prime position or whatever the case may be. It's more of a, who's the guy that if you lose him, your chances of playing for a championship are diminished the most. And I think of the guys that we talked about, I think all of them are they would hurt to lose them. Like Michael Mayer's the first one that popped in my head. When you lose Michael Mayer, you lose an arguably the best tight end in college football. There's no doubt about it. Reason we didn't pick Michael Mayer, Sean, is because it's partly because, number one, you're pretty talented there. Number two, you don't have to have a tight end. You can adjust other things, right? So it'd be a big loss, but they could potentially weather that storm, right? Like they lost Michael Mayer last year, didn't have him for the Virginia Tech game, still went on the road and beat Virginia Tech without Michael Mayer. It's not ideal. We're not saying, they're totally fine. Adam Zillak just put Lorenzo Styles. That was a guy that was on my list that you kind of were like, oh, okay, wasn't expecting that one. But then when you think about it, he's the most complete receiver they have skill set wise. I don't know if there's another Lorenzo Styles type of player on the roster. That's why I thought about him. Defensively, Isaiah Foskey. Boy, losing him. But then you start thinking like, okay, why isn't Isaiah Foskey the pick? Well, because if they had to go to battle with Justin Adamiola, I think they still have a pretty good football player there.
Yeah.
And there's some things you can do schematically, blitz-wise, to say, hey, look, here's why I think they could be okay with him. Cam Hart is probably my number two overall because of where the depth chart is. There's a big difference in talent between him and somebody else. And if I was going to pick one on each side of the ball, Cam Hart's probably my pick on defense.
And because he locks Tariq in at his strength.
Right. So it wasn't an easy decision, but at the end of the day, Sean, you and I both went with Tyler Buckner is the most irreplaceable player. Again, we've said before, you can win a lot of games with Drew Pine. I don't think this 2022 version of Notre Dame can compete for a championship unless they have that dynamic run throw ability that Tyler Buchner is going to bring to the table.
I was right there with you with the top two. It was Tyler Buchner, it was Cam Hart, and then for me, the next one was Brandon Joseph, because of what I've been talking about, how he's elevated that back end and brought the mentality that was totally different. Not mentality, let me use the word of more of unity in a group of playing together.
Right.
You know, and I don't have to go deep into that, but those are my top three guys. And there was another person that I thought about, but then I said, oh yeah, Harry Hiestands back.
Were you going to say Blake Fisher or Jarrett Patterson?
Jarrett Patterson.
Oh.
Just, you know, being the guy, the leader of that front, everybody else being young. You could go with either one of the tackles.
Yeah.
Right? Because Marcus Freeman has been honest about having a 1A and 1B.
Right.
And one of the units he hasn't seen that yet is at the offensive line group.
Right.
Specifically at the backup tackles. So, yeah, you could say all Blake Fisher. But with Harry Hiestand being the guy that's developing these guys and getting them ready, I feel a lot better about losing one of those guys if we had to lose them.
Yeah.
And, so my top three were Buchner, Cam Hart, and then Brandon Joseph third. But Tyler Buchner, if you'd asked me this question maybe 2 months ago, I'll be honest. The spring game scared me to death. It just flat out scared me to death. I left that. And if you ask me what's one of my biggest fears going into the season, backup quarterback situation is definitely one of them. Like, I thought it was solidified. I thought I would be confident. And it's not, you know, a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, that's just a practice. It's like, I was at practices as well. And I think we both have shared that, you know, one quarterback was better the majority of the practices. So.
And for me, it's not even just that. Because, you know, I'm very high on Drew Pine, and I'm not ready to just give up on Drew Pine because he had a bad spring game. You know my stance on spring games. I mean, he had a bad spring, period. But we've heard of guys have bad. I mean, Maris Luafau, we were told, didn't have a great spring last year. His breakout came during the summer and early in fall camp. Like, he was just making plays, but didn't have a great spring last year. It's more about, I think that Drew Drew, as I call it, he's a point guard quarterback.
Yeah.
But the standard that we talked about before is not, you know, can Notre Dame still be really good with Drew Pine? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Notre Dame is a good football team with Drew Pine at quarterback if he is who we think he is, right? And kind of shakes off the spring rust and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think he can be that kind of guy. The thing is, though, Sean, is the premise was very clear. Not which guy, you know, hurt you and to where you're going to go 4-8, because I don't think there's anybody that they lose and they're going 4-8 next year. It's more of your standard now. The standard that Irish Breakdown holds for Notre Dame is not changing because there's a coach that we like compared to one we didn't like. That would be unfair, and we're not going to do that. The standard is still the same. Championships. Are you going to win and compete for a championship? And to me, my number 2 is Cam Hart. My number 3 is Isaiah Foskey, because I still feel like a dominant defensive end. Cam Hart is a combination of talent plus what's next is a little scarier. The reason I went with him over Foskey is because even though I think Isaiah Foskey is the only guy to me on the roster that can contend with Michael Mayer for best player, and I would argue that he is their best player. Michael Mayer's in the best player on offense. I still think Foskey is going to have a shot to be their best player this year. You know, it's a great debate to have because they're both great players, Mayer and Foskey. But the reason I went with Cam Hart is because if Notre Dame has to go to battle with Riley Mills on one side and Justin Adamiola, and they would just move Jordan Patelho over to Viper and rotate in with Justin Adamiola, there's a lot of teams that would love to have that 1-2 punch at Viper or weak side end of Adamiola and Patelho with Aiden Gobira and Josh Burnham growing and you know what I mean, trying to work there too. Does that make sense? Yeah, so it's more about the health of the depth chart than it is anything about Foskey.
Right.
The reason I'd go with Foskey over Brandon Joseph is twofold. Number one is, even though I agree with everything you said, that's a pretty healthy depth chart. There's a drop-off between Brandon Joseph and Howard and Houston Griffith and DJ Brown and those other guys, but those guys can play. We've seen them play. We know they can play.
Yeah.
And if Foskey's there and Brandon Joseph isn't, he can have a greater impact on the defense because of his ability to rush the quarterback than if Foskey's not there and Brandon Joseph is.
Right.
That's the way I look at it.
Definitely.
Right?
That's a good way of looking at it.
Right. And so it's not a look of who's the best player. Because if it's about who's the best players, then the guy you can't lose on offense is Michael Mayer. He's their best player.
Right.
He might. I think he's the best tight end in college football. If you say, hey Brian, you could trade Michael Mayer for any tight end in college football, I'd be like, I'm good. Pass.
Yeah.
But again, it's just the position. You can go 3 tight receivers. You can go 4 receivers. You can put a second back on the field. You've got other tight ends that are quality players. And you're going to get some more. So you can at least be good there. You're not going to be great there, but you can at least be good there. You can be serviceable there and overcome it in other ways. At the end of the day, the makeup of the Notre Dame football team with the injury questions at running back, I think the running back position group, if they're healthy, is going to be nasty this year. I think Tyree's going to break out.
Yeah.
I think Logan Diggs is a good football player. I think Audric Estime, if he gets his shot, is going to really come out of nowhere and surprise some people. I think Jabron Payne can play. I think Jadarian Price is going to be a good one. But Jadarian Price was banged up his entire junior year of high school. Jabron Payne's had 2 devastating injuries. Chris Tyree wasn't healthy last year, and he wasn't healthy all spring. And Logan Diggs tore his labrum. There's only one back right now that hasn't had some level of really big injury that either kept him out or kept him from being at his best. Because Jadarian didn't really miss any time as a junior. He just wasn't 100%. And that's why a lot of schools didn't go after him because he just wasn't as good as a junior because he was battling an injury all year. And and Jadarian, if you've heard anything, if you know anything about him and his family's coach, never told anybody about it. Like Smitty found out about it because he was at the high school and somebody said it to him like in passing. Oh yeah, he's more explosive because he was injured all year last year. Jadarian didn't want to talk about that. I answered the bell. I was there to play, but everybody else has had a significant injury history. And so you have a guy like Tyler Buckner, he can take some of the pressure off of that in a way that Drew Pine and Steve Angeli cannot, no matter how good you may think they are as throwers. And I think that as we talked about in the podcast yesterday, Sean, I think it was me and Ryan at that point in time, Tyler Buckner as a runner just puts so much stress on the defense that you have to account for. And then also I think that the receiving core has potential, but there's still a lot of question marks there. And there's some injuries, guys coming back from injuries. Is Joe Wilkins going to be healthy? How's Avery Davis's situation going to be? Is Tobias Merriweather going to be able to play as a freshman? Can Braden Lindsey stay healthy? Is Deion Colsey ready to step up? Is Jaden Thomas ready to emerge as a key rotator? There's a lot of question marks there where if you can have a dynamic quarterback that can make plays on his own and elevate everyone around him, you lose that. And all of a sudden, some of these other warts, if they're there, all of a sudden pop up. If those warts aren't there and the receiving core is healthy, the backfield is healthy, then you add him with his dynamic ability. That's where you become an elite offense. So I think either way, Tyler Buckner has to be there. And I think it's not just that. Like, he needs to then play to his potential. He doesn't have to be an elite 5-star quarterback. He doesn't have to throw for 4,000 yards and rush for 700 and account for 40-plus touchdowns and complete 70% of his passes. He just has to be a playmaker. He's going to have his rough moments. He just needs to be a playmaker. And if he can be healthy and be a playmaker, then I think this offense has a chance to be really good. Because, Sean, you'll say it. You've said it. I've seen clips of practice. I know that you've been at practice. Tyler Buckner can do things as a thrower that none of the other quarterbacks in the roster can do. And I don't think people realize that. I don't think because they didn't get a chance to see that in games last year. Yeah. And I'm not talking about running around, and I'm talking about dropping back, reading things, his anticipation, his timing, his ability to take chances, all that stuff. Notre Dame fans haven't had a chance to see that yet. We have, and that's why we have that level of confidence in Tyler Buckner that maybe others don't, fairly, because they just haven't seen it because of how he was used last year. His role in games was not what Notre Dame views him as being. They don't view him as being Brandon Wimbush.
Right.
They view him as more of a Brandon Wimbush as a runner and Everett Golson as a passer. And you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing.
And I told
And
you
that's why he gets excited.
about 3 weeks ago, I hit you and I'm like, yo, I watched this Virginia Tech game again. And it's like, yo, I'm a little more optimistic about Tyler Buckner than I was.
Yeah.
Because I had to take a step back and be fair about what was going on. Like Michael Mayer wasn't there. He came in.
They're down 10-0.
Yeah. And then they take the lead. Virginia Tech, they make some adjustments. You really don't have a guy like Michael Mayer to back them off of you.
Tyree was hurt.
Tyree, exactly. So he really wasn't working with a lot, and he starts to struggle. And I'm saying to myself, and the offensive line wasn't really at the level that he's going to be playing behind. And I said to myself, you know what? He's going to develop. He's going to be better than he was last year. And I see how he changes the game immediately when he comes in. Like, he causes the defense anguish. Like, okay, we have to worry about this guy as a runner. Because he started dominating the game immediately with his legs. Like, immediately. When he walks on the field, he feels like, you can call him crazy. When he walks on the field, he feels like he's the best player in the field. It's almost like that carried over from high school. And even now, when he walks on the field in college, he feels like, I'm the best player. I can make plays. And that's what he tries to do.
Right.
Hopefully, Tommy Rees can get him to be more of a facilitator. Like, yes, know when to use your legs now. We know you can go and make plays whenever you want to. But if you facilitate and you use all the weapons that you have now with this offensive line in front of you, now you become even better as a quarterback.
Sean, we're getting a lot of this comment in the chat too. The green hat is fire. So we've had this question. It is in the merch store. So yes, Sean got that from the merch. Well, yes, Sean wanted that hat, picked that hat out from the merch store. So yes, it is in the merch store. I think that's the thing too, Sean, is that people need to understand is Notre Dame doesn't view Tyler Buckner as a runner that they're trying to develop as a passer.
Yeah.
They view him as a dual threat quarterback because of what he did last year in practices and games. Like, Notre Dame wisely used the skill set that they lacked in the offense that he had. That's why he ran like he did. They didn't do that because he can't do other things.
Yeah.
Now, was he as advanced as Jack as a passer and reading defenses and all that? No, he wasn't there as a true freshman compared to Jack as a fifth-year senior, who's a smart, veteran, experienced kid who had taken a team to a Rose Bowl and a Big Ten championship, right? He wasn't there yet, but he has the tools. It was just about experience. He didn't play high school football as a senior. He missed all of his sophomore year with an injury. And so, but now that's been shaken off a little bit. He has to now prove he can be healthy, but everyone that I've talked to in any way, shape, form, or fashion associated with the Notre Dame football team tells me the same thing. If 12 can stay healthy, that guy's going to be a problem for people. Yeah. He's really good. And that's from people who don't get to experience his running as much as defenses in the fall. We're going to experience his running.
I agree. I agree.
And that's why he's number one.
Just to clarify on Drew Pine, I've called him the people's champ for the last year. So it wasn't that it scared. When I say the blue and gold game scared me, it's because I was of the mindset coming into the blue and gold game in spring practice that Notre Dame can go into the horseshoe and win with either quarterback. That's what I believe. Like, we can go in with either quarterback and win. Now, I'm more of the mindset, wait a minute. Tyler really needs to be the quarterback for us to go in and win that game. We still could probably be very competitive with Drew.
Yeah.
But to come up with a big time play in crunch time, I would feel more comfortable with Tyler at the helm than I would Drew. I know we can win football games with Drew. That's not the question.
Right.
It just made me back up.
Can you win a championship with Drew? That's still a question mark.
Yeah. That's still
and maybe he proves us wrong, but that's a question, more of a question mark for me. Where Tyler, it's more about, does he have the experience? Can he, improve and all that? Where Drew, it's like, okay, is he good enough to win a championship?
Yeah.
Notre Dame's a 10+ win team with with Drew Pine at quarterback. I have no doubt. And I would even push back a little bit on your Ohio State thing. I don't think it's a given that they'd lose, what I would say is, and I'm curious if you agree with this, Sean, it just means everybody else has to play even better. It puts more pressure on the O-line. It puts a lot more pressure on the defense because now you're going to have to win 27-24.
Yeah.
Or 24-20. It's harder.
Yeah. I still feel like like I said, it's not about win or lose. I feel we're going to compete with either quarterback. Fourth quarter,
right?
I want Tyler. If I have my choice of the quarterbacks, fourth quarter with the game on the line in the horseshoe, give me Tyler Buckner. That's it solidified that. They were kind of, I wouldn't say they were equal, but it really wasn't that much of a discrepancy between the two. Now there's a little bit more of a gap, in my opinion, of who I would want to be at the helm in a tough situation against Ohio State and against Clemson. Forecasting that to November of the season. So when I say, man, that scared me, I'm not saying, please, no one leave here today saying Sean called Drew Pine a buster. That's
right, because we already know everybody says you hate Tyler Buckner.
Absolutely. So now I hate Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine's a buster. The sky is falling.
Yeah, because again, we're talking about a guy that can put a team on his shoulders. We're admitting that there are some potential warts that could pop up on the offensive side of the ball this year. Injuries, things like that. To have a quarterback that can say, okay, I got this, right? In a way where with Drew, his I got this, because Drew will say I got this, and his leadership and intelligence and confidence, but still Drew, he's dependent on, I'm throwing you the ball, now go do something with it. I'm making the check to hand you off the football, now do something with it. Tyler can say, I got this, give me the ball.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
And that type of quarterback can elevate a program. I mean, what has Louisville been since Lamar Jackson's been gone? Right?
They struggle. Yeah.
Look at Clemson now that they don't have a Deshaun or a Trevor Lawrence. They're not the same program.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's a different animal. And Tyler Buckner can be that guy, which is why he's not my number one. But I'm going to be honest with you, it was not an easy answer for me. I mean, I thought really long and hard about Michael Mayer. I thought really long and hard about Lorenzo Styles. I especially thought long and hard about Cam Hart and Isaiah Foskey. But at the end of the day, it's still going to come down to quarterback for me.
Yeah, I saw someone mention Mayer's Lufau in the chat.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you're saying, just understanding the depth at certain positions. And it's
with JD can play Will.
Yeah.
Prince Colley.
Yeah.
Jalen Sneed, Nolan Ziegler. I think they'll be okay there. Now, are any of those guys as good as Maris? No. Right? But that's true of all these positions. Like, there's a drop-off if they lose any of those guys. Same with Joe Alt, same with Blake Fisher, same with Braden Lindsey, same with Brandon Joseph, same with, I mean, a lot of these positions. Riley Mills, Jason Adamiola, I thought long and hard about. He's another one because I feel like the thing about Jason, and I don't know if I mentioned him or not, I meant to. He's written on my list. The thing about Jason is I feel like the reason I thought long and hard about Jason is, number one, not only is the next guy there not as good as him, but the potential options may have to be you move Riley Mills back inside. Now you've impacted two positions negatively if he goes down.
Yeah.
You may have to put Riley inside at 3 technique, which means now you don't have your best 3 technique on the field and you don't have your best big end on the field. And that's another reason why I considered going Jason Adamiola. And I forgot he's written on my list. I forgot to mention him because they don't have anybody else like him. There's good players there, but they may have to shuffle guys around, and then that now impacts you at multiple places. Where if Foskey goes down or is out or not on or is just getting a breather, you've got guys that are playing there. You don't have to take someone from another position. Same with safety, same with corner. With Jason, it's going to require somebody to might have to require somebody to move to get your best 4 on the field, and that's concerning for me. So, you ready to move on to the final topic, Sean?
Let's do it. This has been fun.
Yeah. So this is going to be the part of the show where we look at sort of big picture aspects of college football. Sometimes it'll be related to Notre Dame. Next week, we're going to kind of talk more about this topic from a different angle, and then we're going to have a Notre Dame aspect to the question, which I'm really like we wanted to talk about that part today, but you kind of have to lay this foundation first.
Yeah.
And that is the Alabama dynasty. I think you and I would both agree that it is the certainly the longest tenured dynasty of our lifetimes. I'd have to go back and look at history. I mean, you and I have seen, we're very similar in age, Sean. You and I have seen some very impressive dynasties. Miami of the 80s and 90s was the closest thing to this because they won titles in the early 80s, mid 80s, and then early 90s.
Yeah.
But this has gone on longer. I mean, you're talking about 09 and then 2020, 12 years stretch that they won a title, and then they had 4 in between. They've won 6 titles under Nick Saban since he was hired in 2007. So they've also 6 titles. They have been national runners-up twice, right? They were national runners-up last year, national runners-up, 3 times. National runners-up in 18, and then national runners-up again in 16. So they've not only won 6 titles, but they lost in the title game 3 more times. So it's been an impressive feat. Eventually, it's going to come to an end. All do. But is the dynasty over? Twofold question. Is the dynasty over? Yes or no? If the answer is no, then the question is, are they on their last leg? I would say no, the dynasty is not over because I think this 2022 Bama team has a chance to win a title. So I can't say it's over when I think they have a shot to win a title this year. But I do believe they are not the same way better than everybody else team that they've been in the past, in my opinion. So I do believe that they're on their last leg. I do think the dynasty may not be over yet, but it's kind of like, the Roman Empire, like they won some battles towards the end, but it was a matter of if or when they would fall, not if. And that's how I feel about Alabama, Sean. To begin, what say you in regards to the Alabama dynasty?
Well, to start off, we always talked about the foundation of the dynasty and how it started with the coaching staff he put together. That was the first thing. When you go back and you look at the coaching staff he put together and the guys that were literally like recruiting analysts and the NFL influence he had on the coaching staff, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, very similar to what Notre Dame is kind of doing right now. I don't want to jump that far ahead, but it's very similar to what Notre Dame is doing. So you have the foundation of the coaching staff, and then you have that 1 or 2 recruiting classes back to back that really jumpstart everything. And I think we identified those 2 classes before with the Tate Cody class and
the 08 and 09 classes. Yeah.
08 and 09 classes. It's like, man. And then a surprise championship. Everyone was surprised that they beat Texas.
Right.
When they did.
I still don't think they would have if Colt McCoy doesn't get hurt. But he did get hurt, and they did win.
And they did win. But they were already trending. They get the 08 and 09 classes, and then they take off. This is what we talked about. The great ones can evolve.
Yeah.
And what we've seen is Nick Saban, not only with coaching hires, but the way he's recruited, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, because most people will point to the quarterbacks. He allowed himself to change as a defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
In the way he wanted to defend.
Right.
I think one of the things when Ole Miss came in there and put up 40-plus points and beat them, with that great class they had with Quan Treadwell, I think he saw the trend and what was happening and said, you know what? I need to change before the game forces me to change.
Let me ask you a question here, Sean. I think it was more than just that. I think it was the combination of first Johnny Manziel, then Ole Miss.
Great point.
And I think if it was just one or the other, I don't think it would have forced him to change the way he did. If it was just Johnny Manziel and then they go out and win titles with the years that they lost Ole Miss, then he could say nobody else has a Johnny Manziel, right? Until the next Johnny Manziel came up, which is a better version of Johnny Manziel was a kid that beat them in 2016 and almost beat them in 2015.
Right.
But he, the Johnny Manziel Ole Miss thing forced them to change what they do defensively. Then Deshaun forced them to change what they do at quarterback and offensively, because he realized no matter how good we are on defense, team gets a kid like that, we got to be able to score. And, couldn't do it. And they couldn't win that recipe of winning a bunch of, like, I'm looking at their 09 season, Sean, right? Like, Alabama can't win that way anymore. I mean, this was how they that season, had a good win over Virginia Tech by 10. And then they have a 12-10 win over Tennessee, a 24-15 win over LSU, a 26-21 win over Auburn. You can't go through the SEC now and win a bunch of 20-something to 20-something games. In the 08 season was similar to that, right? Yeah. The year that they got beat by Florida in the SEC title game, but they had a 3-point win over Kentucky, a 4-point win over Ole Miss, a 6-point overtime win over LSU. Like, you've got to be able to score. And he realized that after Deshaun, because when Nick Saban's pulling out onside kicks and stuff like that to try to beat you, like, he knows we can't just beat you straight up. And that was a great call. I mean, it was great coaching. They ran some trick plays on offense because they know we just can't straight up, because we got to outscore them. That was the whole point. We have to outscore them. We can't stop them.
Right.
For a coach like Nick Saban to have that feeling of we can't stop you is like, I don't know if he ever felt that before, not with a good team. And so he was like, he's always been sort of I see what's coming and I'm going to try to stay ahead of it. And so then he went out and got, Tua Tagovailoa, kind of got that ball rolling. And then, of course, Mac Jones, who I don't think they saw Mac Jones being what he was, if we're being honest. But then you go get a Bryce Young and, you continue that trend. They're trying to recruit, Arch Manning and Eli Holstein and the 2023 class and guys like that. So he understands now you can't win the way we want to know 9 and 11 and 12. You have to go out and outscore people. And like, if you look at the 2011 title when they beat LSU, Sean, they're not winning the title this year doing that. It was like 22-0, right?
Heck,
like
the first game was what, 10-7?
9-6.
9-6 or something.
9-6. 9-6. Yeah. Yeah. They won 2 games that year, scoring in the 20s at Mississippi State and at Penn State. And then beat LSU in a rematch 21. If they've scored 21 points in a title game now, they're losing. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So he's been able to evolve and stay ahead of things. But I think the reasons why I think that the dynasty is on its last leg is several reasons. Number one, I think the changes in the game and the changes in kids' perceptions is that okay, they've won so much that now it's almost like you want to be the guy that beats them. I think we're seeing more of that.
Yeah.
Well, why do I want to go to Bama and just be another in a long line of great this? Or do I want to go to Clemson or Georgia or Notre Dame or Florida or LSU and be the first that gets this in this era or beats them or knocks them off? I think that's happening. I think that teams are finally catching up to Bama from a spending standpoint, which is helping. I think the fact that Nick Saban has adjusted, but after a while, he's not an easy guy to coach for. That's why he has a ton of coaching turnover.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it in the way that Jimbo Fisher said it in his little childish, petty way. I just mean he's a very demanding guy. He's one of those coaches where if coach is in the office working, you're in your office working.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's just that old school mentality that a lot of older coaches have. It's a hard, and he's very demanding, which is why they win. If you're not giving me championship effort, then I'm going to find somebody else who will. I think it's at the point now where it's just a lot of coaches realize I don't have to go to Bama to be successful. I don't have to go to Bama to get that stepping stone to my next thing. And I think coaches are looking at it the similar way that players do. I want to go there and get my brains beat in by this guy for 2 years. And it's going to be a great thing for him. I'm going to learn a ton and we're going to win and I'm going to get a great opportunity, which is all fine, but it's also going to be a miserable experience for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I think more people are realizing, like, I can go coach with Kirby and get that. I can co-coach. I think Notre Dame's going to have that reputation here soon.
Yeah.
I think as guys like Al Washington and hopefully Dylan McCullough and, some of these Tommy Rees and some of these other coaches kind of get opportunities to become head coaches at the next level or get NFL jobs, wherever the case they may be. I think you're going to see more and more, say, hey, you know what, maybe I go there. Maybe I go work for Ryan Day instead of him, where I can get that opportunity, whatever the case may be. So I think that's another reason. I think the talent level at certain schools is changing. And here's another reason why I think it's on its last leg. I think there are more teams today capable of beating Alabama than there were 3-4 years ago. For two reasons. One, I said to you during during our earlier conversation when you and I were kind of talking about what we wanted to talk about today.
Right.
I think Alabama has slowly come down talent-wise. They don't have the elite across-the-board talent like they used to have.
Right.
That's why you're seeing even more and more. And they've always had a lot of guys that got overdrafted. I've made this argument for years. They have a lot of guys get overdrafted because they view the parts more than they should. It's more about a lot of good parts make a great product as opposed to a lot of great parts. You know what I mean? And so a lot of Bama guys have been overdrafted, especially by the Washington team.
Yeah.
They draft like 3 Alabama guys a year, it seems. It's like if you're an Alabama D lineman, you got a pretty good chance of getting drafted by Washington.
Right.
But they've slowly come down overall, talent-wise. I don't think their receiving talent right now is like what it was a couple years ago. I don't think their running back talent is like it used to be. And yes, Jahmyr Gibbs is a very good football player, but Jahmyr Gibbs is not when they had Eddie Lacy and Trent Richardson and I'm trying to think of the TJ Yeldon and Eddie Lacy when Notre Dame played them. With all due respect, they don't have that at running back right now.
No,
in my opinion,
Alvin Kamara had to transfer.
Exactly. I just again, do they still have the best roster in college football? Probably. So that's not the point. The point is they have always had the best roster, but it was like the next best team was like here. And then the next best team after that was like here. It was like them and then Clemson. But Clemson was good enough at quarterback that they could beat them because they were so good at quarterback. But then, that 18 team was probably the first time I saw Alabama lose a game where I'm like, that other team had better players.
Yeah.
That was probably the first time I've ever seen Bama lose a game in a long time where it wasn't like they made dumb plays or like the Ole Miss game. Remember when Bo Wallace threw that pass and it should have got picked off and then bounces in the guy land? It was like, okay, that's fluky. But the Clemson 18 team was like that team, even 16.
Yeah.
I thought Bama had better players. It's just you had a true freshman at quarterback in Jalen Hurts and you had Deshaun Watson. That wasn't a fair fight for Jalen. The only reason it was a competitive game was because Bama had the better players overall.
Yeah.
2018 was the first time it was like they had better receivers, they had better lines, they had better skill on defense. I mean, they had better quarterback.
Yeah.
It was the first time, but then we haven't seen that a lot since then. The second time we saw that was 2019 when they lost to LSU. And now it's kind of like Georgia is similar to where in the past, Bama's not a couple injured receivers away from not being able to score points. They would still be able to go stop you on off defense or whatever. Their defensive talent is the side of the ball to me that's really taken the biggest hit.
Yeah.
That's what so O-line talent's good, but it's not elite. Running back talent is really good, but it's not elite. Receiver talent's good. It's not elite. I think they made a great O-line hire. That guy's going to get more out of the talent that Doug Marrone did, but I just don't see the elite talent. Now, there's highly ranked guys, but I don't think those highly ranked guys were as good as they should have been.
Yeah.
Defensive line, they've got some great players, but overall, the talent isn't there. You've got Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. There's a drop-off after that. The linebacker talent isn't what it used to be. And the biggest one for me, Sean, the secondary talent isn't close to what it used to be, in my opinion.
No, he's having to play true freshmen. He used to play true freshmen, but they were true freshmen like Minka Fitzpatrick.
Right.
Right. The true freshmen he's playing now in the defensive backfield are nowhere near as talented. Nowhere as near. I'm going to put this out there as well. And this is my cross-reference. I think we just saw evidence of him becoming the bitter old man in college football. And what I mean by that, you go back 4 or 5 years, and I give Roy Williams a lot of credit. Roy Williams, when he got to a point where he saw that the game was starting to pass him by and he didn't like the way things were being done, He didn't stay. He put things in motion and said, you know what? I need to get somebody in here that can carry this program into the future.
Can I ask a question, Sean, on that?
Sure.
Do you mean that the game passed Roy Williams by, or what you need to do to put a team together is what Roy didn't like anymore?
No. The game passed him by. You see, because in order to be able to coach, it's not about X's and O's. It's more about.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it wasn't about the game. Like, the game is like, we're still trying to run the power I in an era where no one can run the power I. That's the game has passed you by to me.
But within the X's and O's,
what I mean is, like, to put a team together, you have to do A, B, and C, and D to put a team together. And then like, that's why John Beilein walked away. We're seeing this a lot in basketball. John Beilein walked away because he's like, I don't want to have to re-recruit my own roster
every year.
You know, and Roy, and I think that I've heard, I don't know this for a fact, but I've read that that's why Jay Wright is walking away at 60. He's not that old.
Absolutely.
And so what Saban is doing, and I'm actually I'm happy about it, even though he's got his own shadiness, which I've hammered him for, is that I think he sees that I don't like where the game is going, not the X's and O's and all that. He's done a little bit of that.
Football is football.
Right. But he's done a little bit of that as he's whined about the up tempo and all that kind of stuff a little bit. But he got past and he says, fine, we'll do it. But I think he sees the game is going in a direction that I don't like. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's good for the game. And I'm going to speak on it. And I have no problem with that. But the point is he doesn't want to do that. And so my question is even if he decides, okay, fine, we're going to do that now, I don't know if he's going to be as good at it. That's a question. And yesterday, I probably had a little different view on that. But I think that is a more thing. So, so I think we're on the same page. Roy Williams could still coach football. If you could give him a team or basketball, Roy could still coach.
Yes.
But he wasn't able to get the talent that he was because he didn't want to have to go do the things you had to do to get those elite players anymore.
Now, Roy Williams handled it totally different.
Right.
In my opinion.
So St. Jay Wright too.
Than Coach K did.
Right.
Right. He recognized it. Got out early. Coach K was still able to get a few one and done guys.
Well, he embraced it. I think he embraced that.
No, originally he didn't embrace it.
Right. But he eventually did though.
Eventually, because in order to keep up, he had no choice to take a Kyrie Irving. You know, a kid that was going to play 20 games, really not impact your program and go to the NBA the next year as the number one pick.
Right.
He really didn't like it. But it led to him having the J.R. Barrett, R.J. Barrett, Zion Williamson, and that team.
Got a couple more rings out of it once he embraced it, right? I mean,
that was it. But the thing about it, the two teams, that team and this year's team, were the two best teams that he's had from a roster standpoint under or in the new era. And he didn't win with either one.
Right. I would argue that his three, I'll argue this, you may disagree, that I would argue that his three most talented teams did not win a title.
That's a fair point.
Because the difference is that the 15 team that won a title, yes, they had Jabari Parker and the Jones kid, but they had some veterans on that team that were very important to that team. And that's what they were missing from some of those teams that had the really elite players, the RJ Barretts, the Zion Williamsons. They didn't have enough veterans. Like that team that won a title, you know, they had the freshman class. It was Justice Winslow, Grayson Allen, Tyus Jones, and Jahlil Okafor. I said Jabari Parker. It was Jahlil Okafor.
Yeah.
But they also had Marshall Plumlee, who was a guy, you know, that did a lot of dirty work. They had a Matt Jones, who was a sophomore. They had Quinn Cook, right? Like that was the big thing. It's that guard that could lead, that could make the big play and make the shot and those kind of things. And I think that Emil Jefferson is another one, a big guy that could take some of that pressure off of Okafor.
Yeah.
And some of his other teams were that's what's hurt John Calipari. He's just had nothing but youth for the most part. And so I agree with your premise. And I think Jay Wright's another example of this. But I think that for me with Saban, I just think all the combination of factors, right? Like Rome didn't fall because the Vandals beat him in a battle. The Vandals beat him in a battle because of all the other things that were crumbling around them. And I think in it's similar to that. They're not quite that level yet, but I think they're getting there. And I think more and more kids are wanting to be the team that beats, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like Nick Saban, Alabama, they're Ric Flair, right? To be the man, you got to beat the man. So
Absolutely.
it used to be we're like, hey, I can't beat the man, so I'm just going to join him. I'm going to join the Four Horsemen because I can't beat him, right? You know.
Yeah.
But now it's like, no, I want that shot. I want a shot at the ring. I want to play, you know, climb the mountain with them, and because I want to be the guy that knocks you off. And I think you're seeing more and more of that from coaches. I think you're seeing more and more of that from players. And I'm going to say something else. There is a new era of young coaches that don't fear Alabama the way that some of the older coaches did.
I agree with that.
Dabo started it.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing it with guys like, you know, guys like Ryan Day, Marcus Freeman. Marcus hasn't shown it on the field yet because he hasn't, you know, this staff hasn't coached, but from a recruiting standpoint, I'm not afraid of Alabama.
Not afraid of Alabama. Yeah.
Right. And where in the past, kind of like, well, you know, we're going to pay reference to, you know, to Coach Saban, right? Like, you know, we'll continue the Roman thing. Like, you know, we'll pay our monthly fee. You know, we'll give our gold. We'll give our, you know, our dues. We'll pay our dues, and we'll just, you know, we'll do our thing over here, which is really good. These other ones, like, forget that. We're doing all the work here. We're not giving you jack.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I'm not only going to not give you jack, I'm going to come for your stuff. And I think that's what we're seeing more of. There's less. It's kind of like, you know, I love using references, right? Like you're watching Rocky IV, right? And he's fighting Drago and it's just getting killed. The moment he cut him, it was like, okay, I see, you know, and I've talked about this with USC. Part of the reason that teams were afraid of USC was, or USC was so good. Yes, they were super talented, but people were just afraid. You lost to USC before the game even started.
Yeah.
Because you just, I can't beat these guys.
Yeah.
And here's something else. I'm going to make a claim today. The Miami dynasty began to end in 1988. Here's what I mean by that. The dynasty doesn't just end like that. The dynasty takes a while to end.
Yeah.
Because 1988 was the first time a team, Notre Dame, walked up to the bully and bitch slapped him. Pardon my language.
Yeah.
And said, we're not afraid of you. Matter of fact, we're better than you.
Yeah.
Right. And now Miami still got theirs. They beat Notre Dame the next year. Notre Dame beat them again the next year, but they were never the same team after that stretch.
Heck,
When Notre Dame beat them 2 out of 3 years.
Lou Holtz will tell you they should have beat them 3 straight.
They should have.
He cost them the 89 game.
100%.
What he says.
100%. And if they had a playoff back then, I think Notre Dame wins in a rematch. I've said that. However, Notre Dame beating Miami 2 out of 3 years and doing it where we're faster than you because we got Rocket, we've got Ricky Waters, but more importantly, we're better than you. We're going to talk just as much trash because there's a difference between trash talk and showboating. Miami was they were showboats. Notre Dame was trash talkers. There's a difference, right? Larry Bird was a trash talker. Chuck Person was a showboater, right? And so to me, Notre Dame was that first team that said, hey, we're not afraid of you. And then other teams are like, hey, you know what? If you punch Miami in the mouth, and then that's when so once Notre Dame kind of drew first blood,
Alabama beat them in the national title game,
and it was over. It was over. Clemson to me was the one for Bama. Clemson drew first blood, and then Nick Saban, and then Kirby Smart was like, hey, you know what? They are human. They can be beat.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing more and more teams saying, you know what? We don't have to be afraid of them.
Wait a minute. What? No, you would have to. Urban at Ohio State was probably the first when they beat Bama in the semifinals.
Yeah, see, I don't go there because to me that wasn't a very good Bama team. And Bama won 2 of the next 3 titles.
I would have to look at that roster. I know Blake Sims was the quarterback.
Yeah. The thing for me on that team, Sean, is they won 2 of the next 3 titles. So it's hard for me to say like, okay, yeah, you know what I mean? Like that's the thing for me. And Miami won a title after 88, but then Notre Dame beat them again in 90.
Yeah.
But the thing for me with Bama is that wasn't one of their better teams. And so because they didn't win in 13 either, you know what I mean? Like, and to me it was because the reason I'll say that is because when you look at that,
I agree with that. The only thing I would push back with is it was the way Urban did it.
Sure, they beat him up front
with Ezekiel Elliott running for over 200 yards.
Yeah.
No one saw that coming against a Nick Saban defense.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I can understand that. I just never thought that Bama team was super talented. Like here's their 10 best top tacklers, and some of these guys are really good. Some like Landon Collins obviously was very good. Mm-hmm. Reggie Ragland, Traded Priest, Nick Perry, Geno Smith, Jaron Reed was pretty good. Ashawn Robinson is solid. Cyrus Jones, Xavier Dixon, Eddie Jackson, but they had a lot of young guys on the team. That to me just wasn't a great Bama team, in my opinion. And I think Ohio State had better players.
The freshman linebacker on that team.
The freshman linebacker?
There was a freshman linebacker on that team. He was number 8 at the time.
Rashad Evans? They didn't. You're thinking of Trey DePriest?
No, Trey DePriest ended up.
He was number 33. Hold on, let me look at it.
That was a freshman that came in.
You're thinking of Rashad Evans? Robert? No, yeah. You're thinking of Rashad Evans a couple years later?
No. There was a freshman linebacker I remember vividly on the long touchdown run that Zeke had.
Wasn't number 8. Number 8. They only had one number 8, and it was a receiver. I'll look up the clip from that touchdown.
He replaced the senior, and he was out of position. He was like the best linebacker recruit in the nation, and he ended up being a very good player. That's why I'm shocked that I don't remember his name right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna look up that touchdown run. But so for me, like what Ohio State did is Ohio State just happened to have that one team that was better, right? Mm-hmm. And that wasn't a great Bama team, and like I said, Blake Sims and all that kind of stuff. But to me, the reason I say Clemson, because Clemson, like Alabama was whooping Ohio State for a minute, right? I mean, or am I getting that backwards? Let me look up that box score because all these years they come.
Red shirt freshman Reuben Foster.
Okay.
Reuben Foster.
He was very talented. Yeah,
Reuben Foster.
Yeah, I'm right. Alabama was whooping on them early. It was 21-6. They were controlling them, and then something, I can't remember what happened, but like Alabama missed an opportunity to put them away,
and then they fumbled, and there was a long pass to the Robisky kid,
right,
for a touchdown.
And Ohio State came back, and then Ohio State got a big lead, and then it was. Whereas in 18, because when I say drew first blood, I'm not even talking about beating them in 16. It's the combination of you gave them a lot of problems in 15, then you beat them in 16, and then you blasted them in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like that sequence of events, which happened in a stretch of 3 years out of 4, 15, 16, 18. And then it was kind of like, you know what? If Clemson can do that to Alabama, why can't we? And so I think this era of invincibility. Now, look, they've still had plenty of blowout wins. They blasted Ohio State in 2020. They've had those games, but it's just kind of like I just feel like teams don't fear Bama as much as they used to.
Oh no. And I think that starts on the recruiting trail.
Right. Exactly.
I think it starts on the recruiting trail.
Exactly.
And it's going to, and I'll just, with Nick Saban, I think he's starting to feel where Roy Williams and Coach K went through at the end of their tenures.
Yeah.
That's going to be the reason you start to see the end of everything in Alabama, because I think Alabama's going to have very good teams, talented rosters,
mm-hmm.
but eventually they just won't be able to get over the hump as easy. And it was the same
mm-hmm.
thing with Duke over the last 5 to 6 years. Great teams, they would lose to a Tom Izzo team that had 3 seniors in the starting lineup, which is like right now in this modern era basketball, who has 3 seniors to start?
Right.
A team in the Elite 8. And
Yeah, I mean, you'll see the anomalies like Baylor, but those teams are anomalies. You know,
yeah,
they're not. And even Gonzaga, who's had some. I mean, Gonzaga's had veteran players, but Gonzaga's also been landing these stud freshmen along with those
along with
veterans.
coach. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And you talk
Right.
about Jay Wright. When Jay Wright, I think Jay Wright wins the national championship, and he has a freshman named Dante DiVincenzo, who probably should have come back, that ended up being the star player in that game. And the kid goes straight to the league, and he was like the seventh player in the rotation.
Right.
And it's like, is this what basketball has come to? Yes, because you have the decision makers in the NBA that don't really watch film, and they'll just choose a guy off of one game and what they project them to be from an athletic standpoint.
Right.
You know, and that has messed up the entire flow. The NFL now, it's a different story because you have to play 3 years and you have to have film. They'll still overdraft you if you come from certain programs, like you said, because we both look at the development and then how the defensive backs in the NFL have fared coming from Alabama. I can speak for one right here in Chicago. Eddie Jackson, Wolf. Like one good year, and that's about it.
Right.
Minkah Fitzpatrick has had a pretty decent NFL career. But if you go down the list of all the players in that defensive backfield from Alabama, first or second rounders, and just look and think about, have they lived up to that draft selection? More than likely, you're going to say, no, they haven't. And most of them hold and are penalty prone and can't get away with the same things they got away with a great front seven in Alabama when they go to these NFL teams and they don't have that same dominant unit in front of them. So I think we saw evidence of him seeing, I no longer really have control of things.
Right.
Like I used to in college football. And that rant was just the beginning. That was evidence of him realizing, you know what, I'm losing control. I'm losing control a little bit. And there's really nothing else that I can do to counter it.
Right.
I've been able to evolve in the past.
Right. Or I don't want to do the things I have to do to counter.
That could be the case as well.
Right. I don't want to pay a 17-year-old $2 million to get him to come to school here.
Yeah.
That's a very fair thing to say. I don't mind my quarterback making $2 million. Like some of the responses to his comments were just ignorant. People say, "Oh, you don't have no problem with Bryce Young making." Exactly. I have no problem with guys currently on my team getting paid for what they've done. I have no problem with that, right? I have no problem with that. I'm a supporter of NIL.
That was the original purpose of the original suit that Ed O'Bannon brought.
But I don't want my highest paid player to be some flipping kid that's never done a dang thing. He knows what it's going to do to the locker room when you bring in this freshman quarterback who's making all this money, and your starter, who's a 3-year guy who maybe isn't making that kind of money, is gonna do. And I'm talking like, not Bryce Young, but like Mac Jones. If this was happening a couple years ago, Mac Jones isn't making that kind of money because nobody knew anything. I mean, most the memory people out of Mac Jones going into 2020 was him throwing 3 picks against Auburn at the end of the season, right?
Yeah.
And because not as many people watched the Michigan game where he played pretty well. What does it do to your locker room when your star linebacker, freshman linebacker, who's your second string guy, is got $1.5 million, and because the boosters aren't giving that money to your current players because they're already there,
right?
Or I got to re-recruit my own team again every year because kids are jumping in the portal and making all this. Now, if Nick Saban started talking about that, I'd be a little annoyed by that because, like, dude, you're buying transfers, right? Like, that's the whole thing is Nick Saban is not an angel in this whole thing.
Right.
And I've got a lot of beefs with Nick Saban, but we need to be able to be intelligent enough and thoughtful enough as adults to say, hey, I may not like him and he's been cheating his whole career, but what he's saying about this topic is right.
Yeah. Both can be true.
Right. Exactly.
Both can be true.
Exactly. So, it's interesting, but to your point though, Sean, I think he's like, I don't want to do that anymore. And I think that's where John Beilein was. I mean, John Beilein had just taken a team to a championship game. I mean, he was having great success at Michigan. Yeah. Jay Wright is still in his prime. Did they make the Final Four this year? Or did they only get to the Elite Eight?
They made the Final Four this year.
And he walks away. And so it's like, and he's still kind of young. He's only 60. And it's just kind of like, but it's like, but I don't love the game anymore because this isn't what college athlete. And people say, like, well, these guys don't want players to get paid. Stop being dumb, right? Like the vast majority of college coaches have no problem with their players being able to make money. I don't know of any coaches that are truly against NIL in its purest form.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some. There's nothing ever uniform, but there's going to be some, but most aren't or have no problem with it.
Dabo's been pretty open about being against it,
but I think he's doing it from a different. I think Dabo is very clumsy with how he's gone about it. But I don't think. I mean, one of the first kids I saw in a national commercial was DJ Uyunglele,
right.
the Dr. Pepper commercial. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like he's forbidding it. I think he's just. Dabo has this tendency of like going overboard to make a point, which I think is stupid because you then lose
your point.
Yes. But most coaches fully support NIL. They fully do, but it's kind of like, but when I got to do this to go get an 18-year-old who hasn't proven a dang thing, it goes back to the Pony Express, the excess thing, Sean. One of the greatest quotes from it was when a guy was like, Coach, you don't understand. You got a payroll you got to maintain. Like, who wants to get to that?
Wants to get it? Yeah.
Who wants to get to that? So Jay Wright can be like, I'm all for my kids being taken care of, but I don't want to have to, because it's the combination of two things. It's the portal, the one-time exception portal, and the NIL.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, now I got to re-recruit my own players every year because all these people are offering them money to jump into portal and come play for me, which Bama's doing, right? So I don't have a ton of sympathy. I don't have sympathy for what Nick Saban's going through at all.
Yeah.
Because he's been taking advantage of the system too. But again, that doesn't take away from the fact his comments are accurate, right?
Yeah.
But I then gotta go buy this kid and buy that kid, and when the thing about guys like Jay Wright and Roy, they've been involved in a dirty business for decades. I mean, college basketball players, for 5-star players, have been getting money for decades.
Yeah.
It's just going to such a degree now where it's just insane. And Dion's made a point about this. He's like, y'all don't understand what comes with. He made a point that he's somewhat true, but it's not fully true. He said college athletes don't get the same level of criticism that professional athletes do. And there's some truth to that. He says, but these kids start making $2-3 million and they become professionals. And now it's like, well, I'm going to treat you like the professionals. How many 18 and 19-year-olds are prepared for that?
Yeah.
And but again, it's one of those unintended so there's a lot of, like, does anyone think Deion Sanders is against kids getting paid and getting in out? Does anyone think that? No, of course he's for it. But there's a difference between supporting NIL and buying players the way that they're buying players with the numbers that are going on. It's
unfortunate because it puts, and we share this as well, it puts parents in a predicament to think about themselves selfishly, instead of allowing their kids to be kids and enjoy the process,
right?
Because the process should be fun. Yeah, the process should be fun. They should be thinking about, what's wrong with thinking about, no, it's 75 down here most of the time,
right?
Oh, the girls on campus are really pretty here. They're teenagers. They should be thinking about these things. And now the majority of these kids, or a few of them, are now thinking about what I can get.
Right.
What can I get? What's the best deal I can get? They're not thinking about what's the best school, what's going to be best for their family.
Well, the problem is, Sean,
coming in to watch games.
Here's the problem. There are young men, there are 2023 recruits that I know of who know where they want to go. That, yes, NIL is important to them, but it's like down the list of things because they understand the system, the coaches are going to coach me up, the education, things like that, the fit, the geography, whatever the case may be. But there are parents that are pushing them to other places because of the money. That is sad.
Yeah.
And the fact is some of these parents some of them just don't understand it. Some of them are it's just a greed thing or a status thing. But like, if you get $1 million from this school and they can't develop you, they won't coach you up, you're not going to get the education.
Yeah.
That $1 million is just that. It's $1 million.
$1 million.
Where you go to a school, let's say a kid picks a Notre Dame or a kid picks another in Alabama. Let's say a kid turns down $2 million from A&M to take $300,000 at Alabama because he knows, I'm taking an initial cut, but I'm going to get developed by the best. I'm going to go play. I'm going to be a first round pick, because this is the thing I'd said to somebody yesterday is if parents were smart, they would understand that yes, you can get this life-changing money, which, let's be honest, when you look at inflation and all things right now, $1 million doesn't go as long as it did 10 years ago. Let's be real about that, right? First of all, half of it's gone right at the front, right? And now what? Okay, then you got to pay your agent. You got to pay this. You know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden that money's not there, but you go to a school and you get developed properly. Forget the education piece. That's a big part of it. Even if you take that away, you go to Texas A&M as a quarterback, and Jimbo Fisher does not have the greatest everybody's always, he's a quarterback whisperer. Based on what? Jameis Winston? Like, Jameis Winston showed up as that dude.
The fact that he was able to, I don't know how, but the fact that he was able to get Jameis Winston to leave the state of Alabama,
sure,
somehow, some way,
sure, right. Jameis probably had a problem with how dirty Nick Saban was as a guy, right?
Right.
But you go down to it, and it's like, you're going to go there and be the next Kellen Mond, where he's going to just run his offense, whether it fits your style of play or not. No. And then all of a sudden you're getting picked around the same place Ian Book is getting picked.
Right.
Or you're going to go somewhere where that's a coach, the coach better. The system works for you. All these things fit. And I think I can get developed and be drafted. The money you're going to lose from being a first-round pick to a fourth-round pick is way more than whatever the boosters are paying you to go there.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what you don't have enough. And this is what happens when you just open the system up without putting any sort of situations in line to help educate people. Right? Because if you just hand young people money, if you'd have just handed me $1 million when I was 18, I promise you I'd have made some really bad decisions with it.
You think?
Because then I'm like, wait, hold on a second. What's this thing from the IRS saying I had to give them? What is this crap about? I didn't have a job. I got this money from so and so. Like, what are you talking about? Right? Like, okay, the IRS says I now owe them $200,000 because I didn't pay them taxes, or whatever. I mean, there's all types of things. I'd have spent it on this, spent it on that. I wasn't mature enough to handle that.
Yeah,
if there was no system in place to help me understand what to do. And that's the problem. They just opened it up and said, the kids were basically sacrificial lambs to, we don't have to deal with this. So we're just, open the kids up to all these vultures and, have at it.
It was basically the NCAA throwing their own temper tantrum.
Yeah.
Like, we can't control this anymore. We'll forget it.
Fine. You want to sue us for every other thing? Fine.
Right.
Okay. You're punishing the kids now.
Right.
And again, we could go. This could be another conversation another day, and we'll try to get back on track here. But this is why the NCAA brought this on themselves in a lot of ways, because all you had to do was say, if someone's going to use a kid's likeness in a video game, the kids deserve a little bit of that. Like what bothers me about the NCAA is they have ruined the word amateurism. I'm a big believer in amateurism.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think amateurism needs to be defined the way that the Olympic Committee, because that's where they have ultimately got it from, the Olympic Committee, who has since changed their definition of amateurism. The NCAA never did. I'm a believer in amateurism, but that shouldn't mean you can't make money at all off anything. It's like, remember when the kicker from, I think it was UCF, had a YouTube channel he's making money off of that had nothing to do with football, and they banged him for it? Like, you're idiots. The Ed O'Bannon thing should have never happened.
But check this out, Brian. The Ed O'Bannon thing came after Ed O'Bannon led UCLA to a national championship, and recognized how much the school profited.
Right. But I'm okay with that's not an argument that I necessarily am as open to.
No, but it goes back to your point of your guys that are there producing.
Right.
They deserve the original.
They deserve to be taken care of beyond the fact that it schools don't even give the full cost of attendance.
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you would sell a kid's jersey and he doesn't there. Because like I've even said, even if you don't want to pay players, start a fund where if we're going to sell jerseys, we're going to put 20% of the sales or whatever into a fund. So when kids graduate, we give them X amount of dollars to make sure that they are, can get on their feet. The kids that are going to the NFL maybe don't need it, but help pay medical bills from your time to help you do this, that, and the other thing. Like why was that? If you graduate, here's your graduation present.
Yeah.
You get this.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to do that. Like, and the O'Bannon thing to me is like the whole, schools are making money off of you. Well, yes, but the people say, well, education is not of value. Okay, fine. Pay players, but then don't give them scholarships. Make them pay tuition. Well, that's not fair. So clearly a scholarship has value, right? But it shouldn't be the only thing is my point. So if you're going to give a school $200,000 because they're on, or 100, I think it was at the time, it was like between like $100,000 and $150,000 each school's getting for being in EA Sports, NCAA football, or in basketball game. Why aren't the kids getting that? Like if they just would have been like, look, it's them. It's these kids. It's like we're using their names, their likeness, all these kind of things. Right. They should get a cut of that. And if they just would have done things like that, then we wouldn't be here to the degree that we're here. And the people that were raising those loans, like, look, man, you're just being greedy at this point in time. You know what I mean? Like, because there is value to what schools, like everybody's like, well, the players do all the work and they get nothing. They get a freaking platform for their game to be on. Because here's the deal. If Jameis Winston, or let's pick a 5-star player, went and signed with Manchester College in Northern Indiana, guess what? He's a nobody for the next 4 years until he goes to the NFL, because nobody's turning on ESPN to watch that kid play. It's not about you. It's about it's Notre Dame. Fans are tuning in to watch Notre Dame because they're Notre Dame fans. And it doesn't matter who the next kid is. It's still about Notre Dame. And so you are getting something more than just a scholarship. You're getting a platform. You're getting all this. You're getting the exposure. You're getting the alumni base. You should be getting an education that is going to have value to you. The problem is that they got so absurd with the greed that they were using they were putting them on posters and putting them on their jerseys on sale and selling for $200 a piece, and the kids get nothing. Yeah. Like, I can't afford to walk into the bookstore and buy my own jersey. That's absurd.
It's absurd. Yeah.
And so they took it so far that they defined amateurism in such a way that it was just beyond stupid, that they brought this on themselves. They could have stopped this years ago. They should have been like, look, this thing about the Ed O'Bannon, it should have never gotten to that point. It should have been right away. It should be like, you know what? You guys are right. This is how it should be. Because once you lost that court case, you set a precedent for the next time that happened. The fact that when they allowed it to get to the courts in a stupid manner, like the Northwestern thing, they should have fought.
Yeah.
They should have fought that. The union thing to become employees, because here's the thing. You think it's cool to be an employee, and you're a smart kid who went to Northwestern, but let me tell you something. Like somebody said earlier, I'm paying you $400,000. I expect a lot more.
Yeah.
You're fired.
You're fired. They wouldn't like that.
No. Well, hold on. We don't want to be that kind of employee, right? Like, but that's the thing is, but there aren't enough people saying, hey, you don't want to go down this road because you don't understand what comes with that. You're in your little, Northwestern bubble. You don't understand what comes with being an employee. Okay. Well, coaches can up and leave. Yeah. Coaches can also get fired. You know what I mean? If they're not doing their job, you're getting your 4-year guaranteed contract from scholarship from Northwestern. But if your position coach doesn't do his job, he's unemployed. You're still on scholarship. You just got benched. You're not playing, but you're still on scholarship. It just, so anyway, back to the original conversation. The whole thing about this is that I agree with you that I think that the changes to the game there are good. I think Nick Saban has always been a very savvy guy. And I'll say this. I think what he said is right, Sean. I think what he has been saying about the transfer portal about NIL as an enticement, and this is what's so irresponsible with the media. They keep saying Nick Saban's against NIL. No, he's not. Neither's Marcus Freeman. Neither's most coaches. They're against NIL being used as an enticement because now it's all about the schools with the most with the donors with the biggest money are now the schools are going to get recruits, and that's not how it should be. Right.
Because you haven't added value.
Right.
To the brand yet.
Right.
That's like me pouring into my 401k. I can't pull out something from my 401k if I haven't deposited anything into it.
Right.
So what have you put into it as an incoming freshman or as a recruit? Nothing. So now you just want us to give out of our brand to get you to come. No, it shouldn't be done like that. Shouldn't be done like that.
And I think what makes me so the point I was going to make, Sean, is I think most coaches are for NIL. I think Nick Saban is for NIL. The thing that makes me realize that the thing is about this conversation, Sean, is because we're going back to Alabama. What he said was right. But the fact that he said it the way that he did, Nick Saban does not say things emotionally very often, except if he's going to rip a reporter about something. But like when he goes to speak of these things, he says things with a purpose.
Yeah.
He spoke emotionally. And the reason that I know he spoke emotionally is because he tried to fix it the next day. He tried to call Dion. He tried to call Jimbo. If that was targeted, I knew exactly what I was saying.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have offered an apology. I'm like, I stand by what I said.
Exactly.
Because he's always done that. And the thing is, back to your point, Sean, I think he's a little shook by this whole thing. He doesn't like it, and he's not handling it to the way that he has handled other changes.
Yeah.
The way he's handled tempo and mobile quarterbacks and all that other stuff. And I think that's, to me, the final sign that there's cracks there. And how's he going to handle it? And I think some of his hires in recent years haven't been great. We talked about this last year. Hiring Bill O'Brien was not a good hire. Hiring Doug Marrone as the O-line coach wasn't a good hire.
Yeah.
And now he made up for that one by, hiring a guy from Kentucky, which is a really good hire. But I think they're slowly coming down. But even more importantly, Sean, I think some other programs are coming up. And I think that's the big thing.
It was very telling what he told Kirby Smart as they met at the 50-yard line at the end of the game last year.
Yeah.
You remember what he told him?
No.
You kicked our butt in the fourth quarter. That's not something Nick Saban has been willing to say to a lot of people. And it goes back to your point. Like, teams are beating them, but the way they're beating them now is a little bit different. And you go back to the 18 Clemson team and you look at what they did. And most people will say, yeah, their wide receivers didn't get hurt. I still think Alabama beats Georgia. And that could be fair. But like you just said, if Colt McCoy doesn't get hurt, does Bama win their first one under Nick Saban? So there are a lot of things you can talk about ifs. If it was a fifth, we'd all be drunk. And we're all sober today. Well, we are. I don't know about the rest of IB Nation. You guys might be enjoying a nice little beer on a summer day.
I got to get that mojito.
Right. You're funny. Well played. Well played. But absolutely. He definitely, and you can see the way he reacted. It's like, oh yeah. Oh yeah. He knows he's losing control a little bit.
Yes. That's it right there.
Yeah,
it was one of the very few times we've seen Nick Saban in a structured environment offer an emotional response, and exactly, and so it's just another reason why I don't think the Alabama dynasty is over, but it's close. It will be soon, and then he'll walk away, and when he walks away, that's when it's truly over, in my opinion. And that's going to be the question, Sean, is if the NCAA doesn't do anything or make any changes, how much longer is he going to stay around? He's either going to adapt to it or he's going to just walk away. I think in the end, he'll eventually walk away. I think he may do like a recruiting class or two where they got to do that. But I think he's like, screw this.
Yeah.
I think the first time he's got to deal with a kid walking into his office saying, Coach, I'm going to join the portal if you don't give me more money. He's going to be like, get out of my office and here's my resignation letter.
He's biting his lip when he's, oh man. I side with coaches. I don't side with coaches a lot.
Right.
But I side with coaches in the sense of, you're trying to develop kids, you're trying to teach kids. You're trying to make sure that they learn how to play this game and that they become young men at the same time. And it's not an easy job.
Right. And not all of them care about that.
And not all of them care about that. But the ones that do will tell you it's
Right.
not an easy job. And some fall through the cracks.
Right.
You know, and they're not able to make it all the way through to get their degree or even matriculate to the NFL. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of guys that look at those young men as their sons. And imagine your son telling you that they want to find another dad.
Right.
Because you're not good enough.
You're not, my allowance isn't enough, Dad.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go move in with the Johnsons down the street.
Exactly. That, you know, for those that care, regardless of the decision, for those that care, and that's one of the beautiful things about Notre Dame, and I think it's a decision that has absolutely nothing to do with the coaching staff. Most Notre Dame players that come there stay well beyond the time that they could have transferred because they wanted to get their degree.
Right.
They want that degree.
Right.
Before they transfer for football reasons.
Right.
That has nothing to do with the coaching staff.
And you and I know of several players that wanted out.
Yes.
But mom and dad was like, no, you got a year left. Get your degree. You can figure the rest out later.
Right.
You know, and that's not happening in other places. Right.
Yeah.
Because again, but that also shows, Sean, it's further proof that there is value to the scholarship. Right? It's just the problem is nobody wants to have a good faith discussion about these things. Maybe this can be a topic of a future Saturday show. The problem is people that are pro paying players don't make good faith arguments. And the people that are making the old, you know, a scholarship is enough are not making good faith arguments.
Right.
That's the problem. It's like no one wants to really let's actually do real solutions, not just my side is right. Let's make real solutions. Let's really come to, you know, what's best for the young people, but also what's best for the game. And the problem is there just aren't enough people doing it. There aren't enough coaches. Like, you know what really bothered me the most about the whole thing, even more than the media, is all the coaches that were like, yeah, Nick's right, but he shouldn't have said it. Why? You know, it's like, what is that? Why? It's an unspoken rule. Well, start freaking speaking.
Yeah.
Stop being cowards.
Yeah.
And realize you are stewards of this great game.
Yep.
You will be judged on what you leave. It's like with anything. What is every generation of Americans should be judged on? Did you leave this country better for your grandchildren than you inherited it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And
that's and if that means sometimes you got to say uncomfortable things, then you stand up and say uncomfortable things. That should be how it is, right?
Yeah.
It's no different here. You're stewards of this great game. If you're not man enough to stand up and say, you know what, this isn't going to go over well for me. People aren't going to like this. But I see what's happening to these kids.
Yeah.
I see the vultures. Like professionals have a hard time keeping the vultures away. Yeah. We're now opening up to 16 and 17. We're now opening up these animals to these 16 and 17-year-old kids. You know what I mean?
It's ridiculous.
Like, that's supposedly good for young people? Oh, because they're getting their money. Hey, y'all, money ain't everything. You know what I mean? And that money's going to be gone soon. And what are they then going to have? Gee, I really wish I'd have gone to this school and gotten a real education. Not gone to this school where they make everybody major in general education, and now the only thing I can do is teach PE in that state.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's not enough. If you really care about these kids, then be willing to have the stones stand up and say, I don't care if people don't like this. I don't care if other coaches should say I should just shut my mouth. I'm not gonna. Right? I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that I have.
Now, I can respect that from Dabo's point of view and from Nick Saban's point of view.
Yeah.
Coming from the generation that they came from, they view themselves as caretakers of the game.
Right.
And when they leave, they want the game to continue.
Right.
And to be in a better place.
Right.
And Nick sees things going in a very bad direction.
Right.
very bad direction, and he's not scared to speak on it.
Right, which is why I have respect for that and not for Mike Krzyzewski.
Yeah, and then people saying, well, he's only speaking up now because he's at Alabama. That's the reason why he should speak up.
Right.
Because he is the head coach.
Right.
Of the best program, the most
because he is the greatest coach of our generation.
Absolutely.
Hands down.
Absolutely.
Hands down. That's right. And that's the problem is like so many people say, well, I support the players. Like you said that you tend to support players more than you do coaches. Fair enough. And depending on the subject, I'm the same way. Some subjects I'm not the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you have to be intellectually honest, Sean. And that's the thing that you and I have always had in our conversations. No matter what side we may be coming to something culturally or politically or whatever the case may be, we're trying to be intellectually honest with it, which then allows, so you know what? I'm normally against this, but in this instance, I'm for it because here's why I think it's good for young people.
Yeah.
Or I'm normally for players, being financially taken care of, but the way they're doing it is not good for them. Right. But the problem is there's so many people like Jay Billis and all this who just want to be like the cool guy that they'll just say, whatever works, and then privately they'll be like, oh, this is a terrible system, but they won't say it publicly because they don't have any, there's no men of courage. Yeah. There's a really cool movie that I saw a few years ago called Courageous. And it was a Christian film. I don't know if you ever saw it, Sean, but it was just where are the men of courage in our society?
Yeah.
Where are the men of courage in this game of ours? Who are the people willing to stand up? Like what I'm saying now, what you and I are saying now, it's not popular.
No.
There's a lot of people in our chat that don't agree with this. Oh, let them get theirs. Okay, that's not the point. That's not really a comeback to anything we've said, whatever. But, there's so many national media people that are just have no courage whatsoever. There's so many coaches that think, but this is wrong. If you're saying it's wrong privately, but you're not willing to say it's wrong publicly, you're a coward.
And you become part of the issue.
You are the problem.
Yeah.
The people cheating and people like Lincoln Riley are part of the problem. The people that hate Lincoln Riley but don't have the stones to call him out publicly are just as much, if not more, a part of the problem. And that's what's going on here. That's what bothers me. And so that's why I'm good for Nick Saban and good for Roy Williams and good for Jay Wright. And it's one of the reasons I have no respect for Mike Krzyzewski. So I just it's just the way that it is.
Yeah,
so,
but
anyway.
The end, it's the back end,
right,
of the Alabama.
I agree.
It's the back end.
And this will be the final nail, I think, in the Alabama dynasty.
Yeah.
Or the final axe that chops down the Alabama dynasty. And I think there's been little things here and there. Like I said, Clemson, I think really cut them, in the way that they did to them. There's all types of things that like the portal, that doesn't hurt Alabama at all. That's helped Alabama.
Yeah.
They're taking full advantage of that. And it's more of, this is the one where it's like, you know what it is, Sean? It's like you do something in life. You've been through this. You and I have we've both gone through this in our lives where something we used to love to do, I just don't love doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And it's time for a change.
Time for a change.
And we're going to see a lot more coaches start to do that in college, because it's like, if I'm going to have to be coaching professionals, then I'm going to go to a league where once the guy signed a 4-year contract, he has to actually honor that 4-year contract.
Yep.
And they're actually grown men, and I don't have to recruit year round, and I can actually go on a family vacation in the offseason because it's not a 12-month-a-year job. You're going to see a lot more coaches say, screw this, I'm going to the NFL. Of the best coaches will do that.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate thing. So, yeah. Somebody said Brian's hoping for an Alabama downfall. This is the problem. You try to have grown-up conversations and people say things like that. I think Bama being good is good for college football. Anyone that'll say otherwise is silly. So if you don't actually have something constructive to say, don't. It's not that hard.
Yeah, we're not hoping for a downfall. We see the trends.
Yeah.
And we're just speaking on the trends that are out there. And if you choose to ignore them,
right.
Then it's
because Sean, like, what have you and I both said? We talked about this today too. I get sick of all the people that want to say we need more parity. So let's cap what you can pay coaches. Let's cap the number of assistants you can have. Let's cap the number of analysts you have. Because who does that hurt? It's all geared towards hurting Bama. I think that's bullcrap. If you want to beat Bama, then outwork them, outcoach them, out-recruit them. Right? So sit there and say like, oh, I'm hoping for Bama's downfall. That's childish.
And that's, you know what? That's the issue. That's why Nick Saban showed respect to Kirby Smart.
Right.
Him saying that, you know what? You kicked our butts in the fourth
Yes.
quarter.
You beat us on a recruiting trail.
Everybody else.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
You worked your tail off to get here.
That's why he's not calling out Kirby publicly.
Absolutely.
And he's calling out Jimbo.
Exactly.
100% right. 100% right. Because if you're going to beat me, and that's why he's always shown respect to Dabo. Because Dabo just beat us. They just beat our butts.
Yeah.
They went out and got kids, and they beat our butts. Right? I mean, that Nick Saban has never been afraid to say to someone,
Good job.
You got in that behind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't see him taking shots at Kirby. You don't see him being disrespectful to Kirby. The biggest threat to Nick Saban is not freaking Jimbo Fish. And this is the worst thing. Oh, well, Saban's afraid of Nick Saban is not afraid of Jimbo Fisher. Not at all afraid of Jimbo Fisher. If he wants to tear down someone he's afraid of, he's going after Kirby. He's going after Ryan Day. He's going after Marcus Freeman. He's way more worried about them than he is Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M. You know what I mean? So that's the reality of it. You know, that's the reality. I like excellence. I love excellence.
Yeah.
And so I've never been someone's like, let's tear down Alabama. Bullcrap, beat them. What was the whole point of the beginning of our show? Notre Dame we're not saying Notre Dame should Marcus Freeman go up publicly and say things and tear down Alabama. No, it's beat them, fight them, go after their kids, out-recruit them, out-coach them, beat them. That's what it should be about.
That's the beauty in it. You know how it felt as a Notre Dame fan to beat Miami in '88? It's like, I want to make this clear. I don't want to beat Alabama when Nick Saban is gone. I want to beat them now.
Yes.
I want to beat them now.
Yes.
As a fan, let's beat them now.
If the only win Notre Dame would have had over Miami in the 80s was beating Dennis Erickson, it wouldn't be the same.
Wouldn't be the same.
They beat Jimmy.
They beat Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah. Right. They beating Florida State with their probably one of their best teams ever. That means a whole lot more than beating them if they would have beat them in the Orange Bowl a couple years later with Chris Ricks at quarterback.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Beat them when they're at their best. That's if that's how it should be. I think that's a great point. Like Sean is what made that game so good is because Miami was great. And you beat them at what you do. You fought them. You beat them. They went down to Florida and beat them for Derek Brown. They went and got Rocket. They did the work. They put in the work. Yeah. They did the work in the offseason to say, hey, we're not going to take this again. Yeah. We're not going to take this. What was it, 24-0 the year before? No, we're not going to do this again.
Yeah.
You know, the Lou Holtz talking about, that whole offseason, the 6 a.m. workouts, because I'm going to find people that are tough enough that want to be here.
Yep.
That, and then we're going to go out and we're going to put in the work and we're going to beat them. That's how it should be. That's what Marcus Freeman's doing. It's not looking for shortcuts.
No.
It's not looking for shortcuts. He's saying we're going to outwork them. And we can't have $1 million analysts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap into some other streams. James Laurinaitis doesn't need $2 million being the graduate assistant. Mm-hmm. That's my guy. Yep. I'm going to go get him. We're going to get Chris Watt. We're going to do it differently, but we're going to do it with the goal of we're coming for you. And that's how it should be.
And hopefully he has the same message that Lou Holtz had.
Yeah.
Someone, I forget the interview, someone asked him, like, man, how good of a coach do you really think you were? And his response was, go ask Bobby, Jimmy, and Bo about me. And I said, that right there, for me,
that's right. That's how you're defined. Go
ask those guys about me. Yeah. And eventually Marcus Freeman's going to say, yo, go ask Ryan, Dabo, and Lincoln about me.
Right, exactly.
They'll tell you
exactly
how good of a head coach I am. And
exactly.
That's it.
Well, Sean, this was a great show, I think. This was a lot of fun.
As always.
Great. So we're gonna be back next week. Next week's we don't know what our recruiting and our team topic's gonna be next week, but we'll give you a little hint. We're gonna talk next week about will we ever see in our lifetime? Again, we're older. Will we see in our lifetime another run like Bama's had? Anything close to it. I would throw Miami. We saw Miami in the 80s and early 90s had a very similar run. What was it, like 5 titles?
Don't forget the 2000.
No.
Quick,
I'm talking about a sustained dynasty.
Yeah.
Miami had two great teams. But the reason I say 80s, 90s, and not the 2000s, because that was a very short-lived. Once Butch Jones left, it was
over.
It was basically over. Now, they didn't win a title with him, but when you look at the 80s, they won 83, 87, 89, 91. They won 4 titles in a decade and had other years that they were close. I mean, losing, in 88, they finished number 2.
Yeah.
Was it 86 when they lost to Penn State? Right? They beat Penn State, they win. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there were other times they were close. So, that's what's about. Saban won 6, but he also lost in the title game 3 times.
Yeah.
Right? And so will we see a team like that for over a sustained period of time? And then the second part is Notre Dame capable of having that kind of dynasty? Maybe not 6 titles, but can Notre Dame go 10 years where they win multiple national titles and others? So that's going to be the topic for next week's conversation. So that's going to be Sean's look for the next week.
Yes.
Me and him are going to be kind of like,
Yes.
And I promise you, we're going to probably answer that question differently, each of us, about 9 or 10 different times before we get to next week's show and we come down to a conclusion. So that's what next week's Saturday show is going to be about.
Yeah.
Is that, because I think that's a really interesting thing. And what would a Notre Dame dynasty look like if it can't get that? So, and then what would have to happen? So this is going to be a really fun conversation next week. So, and then also we'll kind of talk about what programs are capable of having an Alabama type of dynasty. Because some aren't. Some are capable of having that one-off. LSU's had a couple one-offs, right? Like they had that stretch of like 5 years where they won 2 titles, and then they won another one in 19. I think some programs are capable. I think Florida State's capable of being really good, but are they capable of winning multiple championships? Can Miami ever be that again? What programs are capable of having that kind of run? And we'll discuss it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So anyway, tons of fun, Sean. Thank you so much for being with me today. Sean's got a couple stories on Charles Jagasaw, which I'm going to put up here in a little bit once we're done with the show. Also has some stuff for Cam Williams on the message board. So if you are not signed up for the message board, you need to do so. I wanted to speak to something that Mike Michaels talked about as well. He had talked about how we're assuming that people know everything about what we think about Dante Moore. You have to understand, we don't assume everybody reads every platform, but you have to understand that we are not putting everything we have on every platform. There are some things that we will only put on the premium message board because otherwise, why be part of a premium message board? If you can just get it in another platform, that's a business decision that we made. And so if you want those things, I think we give you a lot of great content on the show.
Yeah.
We put a lot of content out on our free articles, but there are going to be some things that are just like, this is for premium members. And that's just how it's going to be. So I'm not saying that disrespectfully, but that's the decision we made. And so that's what's going to be. So we understand that people have certain questions. Some of those questions we'll answer here, but other questions are going to be more towards the message board. So I just want people who are new to the show to understand why there are some things we just won't discuss here and why you have to go there to get it. And it's also a great community. So for Sean Davis, my guy, I'm Brian Driscoll. Thank you all so very much. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, sign up for the message boards, check out the articles at irishbreakdown.com. Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Roberts. I can't afford Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Roberts has an article basically saying, now that Notre Dame's back to square one at running back, sort of, with no commitments, where do things stand? He talks about Jade Lamar, talks about Jeremiah Love, talks about Richard Young and kind of what the running back class could look like. We have, Sean, like I said, Sean's going to have a Charles Jagasaw feature up here really soon. So we got a lot of content that we're going to have for you. Make sure you check all of that out. So for Sean Davis, I'm Brian Driscoll. You all are what make this work and make this happen. So thank you for being with us today and being a part of the Irish Breakdown podcast.